What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty, and welcome to another amazing video. You can follow me on Patreon for exclusive stories. 7 Seconds. 186 An amazing gift. When Dean Riding and the Black Dragon arrived, the current king of Alabasta, Cordella, brought the eldest prince, Kubula, and came out to greet them directly, and there were many ministers behind him. After the two sides exchanged pleasantries, they entered the interior thoroughly and began to discuss matters. Dean Riding stated directly at the first time, "Since we have come to East Blue, you should also be very clear about our attitude. We are willing to do everything in our power to protect Alabasta. And our next goal is to build a large base directly in the surrounding area where Alabasta is located. And the area we are going to choose now will also be a desert." When they heard this, the faces of King Cordera and many ministers couldn't help flashing a look of excitement. Judging from the fact that the Dimension Retrograde will establish a base here, at least Dean Riding and others are positive about their Alabasta joining. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone through so much trouble. King Cordera said with a solemn expression, "Don't worry, my lord, once we Alabasta officially join it, we will immediately announce the news to the whole world. However, no matter what kind of crisis we encounter, all of us in Alabasta will never regret it. We will definitely live and die with the Dimensional Retrograde." And hearing the Black Dragon here, the faces of the two also became much better. After all, Alabasta's ability to show such an attitude at this time is already an extremely rare thing for them. After all, as long as they join the Dimensional Retrograde, they will inevitably be surrounded by marine and world government. Advertisement. The encirclement and suppression by two large forces is naturally very terrifying, and Alabasta is probably already mentally prepared to disappear completely. At this moment, King Cordera hesitated slightly and then said, "My lord, it is naturally a good idea for you to establish a base in the area near Alabasta. 1. But I personally don't recommend you do that. First of all, because the area around our Alabasta is all desert. 0. Looking for flowers. If you build a base in the desert, I'm afraid the follow-up supplies and other dimensional supplies will all be a big problem. So I think you may need to choose a more suitable ground in a farther place. For the people of Alabasta, they have been deeply affected by the lack of water dimension and Kuyuan deficiency these years. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Therefore, they naturally don't want the people who go against nature to establish a base here, and also get into trouble at the beginning." Then at this time, Dean Riding showed a faint smile on his face, and then said, "Don't worry, the most important factor in this area is the restriction of the water dimension, but this is not a big deal for us." Quote. Before King Cordera and others came back to their senses, Dean Riding continued to plant a bomb. "Since you Alabasta have decided to cooperate with us, then we need to give you a big gift. I believe this gift will satisfy you for a long time." 187 strongly disagree. The goal of this great gift is initially set to completely help you Alabasta to get rid of the restriction of the water dimension within half a year. When hearing this, everyone in the entire palace was stunned. They simply don't believe what they hear in their ears. After all, to completely solve the problem of the water dimension in a desert area is simply a miracle that cannot happen at all. 293. However, now that Dean Riding has admitted this in front of them, it means that Dean Riding has already thought of all the ways to solve the problem in front of him. After all, Dean Riding is the captain of the Dimensional Retrograde, and the whole world has a clear understanding of the strength of the Dimensional Retrograde. The last time the Dimension Rebels were in the Holy Land of Mariajoy, the impossible became possible, so what if a miracle appeared in their hands again? When he heard this, King Cordera's face was full of excitement, and he said firmly, "As long as the adults of the Dimension Retrograde are willing to build a base in the area near our country, then our Alabasta I will do my best to help you. Whether it is manpower or material resources, we Alabasta will do our best to help." In King Cordera's perception, if one wanted to build a real base, the manpower and dimensions required would be enormous. Since the two dimensional retrogrades have actually decided to build this base, they naturally need to prepare a lot of dimensions. Advertisement. The most critical thing is manpower. It is impossible for all the manpower to be built to be supported by people who were rebels in the dimension. After all, there were not many members in the Dimension Retrograde, and if people from Alabasta were willing to help, they could indeed help Dean Riding and others save a lot of trouble. When he heard this, Dean Riding nodded a little, and said, "When the time comes, we will pay your funds, and we will pay in advance, and we will not let the people of the Kingdom of Alabas help in vain." Just when King Cordera was about to continue to refuse, he was interrupted by Dean Riding waving directly. "Everyone who built this base is a Dimensional Retrograde. Since you Alabasta people have been used, of course we can't take advantage of it for nothing. 0 inches. The most important thing is that the base that is about to be built is open to the whole world. And Alabasta is also a Dimensional Retrograde, the first country to cooperate. In order to carry out the corresponding cooperation faster and more quickly in the future, in order to have more partners willing to enter into corresponding contracts with Dimension in the future, the luxury level of the base near Alabasta must also reach the highest level, and all aspects of the debt it must also be processed. Otherwise, if some kingdom hears that if they want to get the protection of the Dimension Retrograde, they must spend 5.5 of their own country's dimensions to build a base, maybe many people will shrink back when they are on the spot. Therefore, it is naturally impossible for Dean Riding to lose pressure due to a small loss. And soon, King Cordera thought through the key points thoroughly, so he didn't bother with this issue anymore, but said with a firm expression, since the cooperation between our two parties has been finalized, then I will formally report to you. Announced worldwide. Point 188 Explosive news. Since we, Alabasta, have taken refuge in your dimensional retrogrades, we will definitely not be at the ends of snakes and rats. We will formally draw the corresponding boundaries with marine and world government. King Cordera was already completely tired of the many pirates who were constantly raging in Alabasta. They have reported to marine and world government many times, but perhaps it is because Alabasta's national strength is not strong enough, or it may be because East Blue has always been called the weakest sea. In short, the marine and the world government did not respond to this matter at all, and this is one of the most important reasons that led King Cordera to completely guide the dimension retrograde. Of course, in many cases, the resources requested by the marine and the world government are too large, which is also one of the reasons. Soon, Alabasta officially announced the corresponding news. The carrier of the announcement is also Morgan's newspaper. When Morgan's subordinates brought a large number of newspapers and distributed them all over the world, the corresponding news was completely presented in front of the city management. Sabayati Archipelago, many pirates casually picked up the newspapers that fell in the air, and soon, a look of astonishment appeared on their faces. They happened to see Cordera's corresponding announcement. Starting today, Alabasta will officially be included in the territory of the dimensional retrograde. We will unswervingly support the dimensional retrograde, and will completely set boundaries with marine and the world government from now on. After everyone digested the news thoroughly, the entire Sabayati island immediately exploded. Advertisement. The faces of many pirates were full of excitement. Are the Dimension Rebels finally about to start expanding? And they took down a huge kingdom completely as soon as they made a move. That's right, although this Alabasta is located in a desert area, the number of people in the entire kingdom is extremely large. Coupled with the fact that they live in the desert area all year round, the people's customs are tough. Alabasta is definitely a very suitable base for conscription. Perhaps this is why the Dimension Retrograde people attacked Alabasta. But why didn't I hear the people of Alabasta revolt? Did they take the initiative to seek refuge? There's no way to know. After all, Morgan's that idiot's newspaper didn't write a detailed reason. What makes many pirates even more excited is that after a long period of silence, Dimensional Retrograde finally made another big move. After all, this kind of big job is a huge bomb for the whole sea. Because ordinary pirates simply cannot completely control a subjugated country. 557. Even the Lox pirates and the Luogia pirates, they only occupied some small islands this year without clear national ownership. Because the strength of the pirate group may be very powerful, but the marine and world government have more time, energy and abundant logistics materials to conquer many islands that have been occupied by the pirate group. Moreover, once an island is directly occupied by the pirates, as long as the island has the corresponding national ownership, then the world government marine has to be released. Because now as long as they are above the sea, basically all the famous kingdoms have joined the world government. Point 189 Luogia pirates in action. Under such circumstances, the world government, even in order to maintain their rule, must make a strong counterattack at the most critical moment. And what many pirates like to hear is that when this matter spreads thoroughly, the world government and marine have no way to continue to ignore the people of the Dimension Retrograde. And they will soon have a good show to watch. Under such circumstances, everything is developing in a more logical direction. Luogia pirates, among the fleet. At this time, Luogia showed a look of excitement on his face, and then said, I knew that this guy Dean Writing would never be willing to live in a corner, and this guy has already started to act. It seems that the plan we have agreed to cooperate with them can continue to be implemented. Pluton Rayleigh on the side also nodded, and said, That's right, I thought Dean Writing would temporarily stay on the island of Dorwega. After all, he used to sell wine directly on the island before. The experience of dormant for a year. But now it seems that he should have had a better long-term development. At this time, Bullet couldn't help but squeezed his fists, and the surface had begun to be enveloped by a black and red aura, and said directly, Should we set off, since Alabasta has blatantly become a dimensional retrograde-dependent countries? It is conceivable that the world government and marine are fundamental, and it is impossible to continue to endure this matter. So I guess Alabasta will be a complete mess very soon. Advertisement. After a little hesitation, Luogia said directly, It's time to start, we can't miss this stop again. Then, following Luogia's order, the entire huge Luogia pirate group quickly moved towards Alabasta. On the other side of the sea, I saw that the Lox pirates were attacking one of the kingdoms at this time. Lox and most of the core cadres did not take action directly. This battle was mainly to test Kaido's combat strength in actual combat. Mainly by Kaido, together with Captain John and the team he belongs to, the attack begins, and the kingdom is in sight. In just 3 days, nearly 90% of the entire vast kingdom has fallen, and now Kaido is attacking the palace alone. In the kingdom, many strong men gathered inside the palace, frantically stopping Kaido. Although everyone knows that many cadres of the Lox pirates are here, it is impossible for them to survive. But until the last moment of their lives, how could they be willing to give up the hope of survival and escape willingly? The Lox pirates have always had a habit, that is, among all, targets attacked by them, as long as there is resistance, no one will survive afterwards. It is precisely because of this that all those attacked by the Lox pirates will either surrender directly or will launch a fierce resistance. And basically all members will die completely on the battlefield. The Lox pirates officially use this method to continuously hone the many cadres and members within their pirate group. 190 Flame Embers rise to fame. Therefore, As long as you join the Locks Pirates, you will inevitably fall into the never-ending battle forever. Anyone who survives the battle will continue to become stronger, or completely die on the battlefield. And Kaido even slowly rose from such battles. There is a corresponding fighting blood in Kaido's bones. With the continuous occurrence of large-scale battles, Kaido's strength finally began to climb crazily, and finally reached today's scene. At this time, Kaido turned into a dragon man form, raging crazily on the battlefield. 993. The rich armament haki enveloped the whole body, and Kaido showed unparalleled destructive power in the battle. However, apart from this, what is more striking is that beside Kaido, there is a figure with wings behind a black armor. I saw the wings on the back of this figure, gently waving the whole person into an afterimage, crazily shuttling on the battlefield. Swish. One after another piercing sounds began to resound continuously, and this figure was exactly Kaido of the Beasts, right-hand man, Flame Calamity Ember. Flame Calamity Ember also showed great potential on the battlefield. At this time, all the people in Locks who were standing in the distance were paying attention to the Flame Calamity Embers. Where did this little guy come from? It also looks like a good battle seed. A smile spread across Locke's face. Advertisement. Originally, everyone thought that even if Kaido was qualified to build a team, it would be impossible to build a huge team in a short period of time. And if Kaido does not have a team, he will not be able to take advantage of the subsequent siege of the capital. Moreover, it is impossible for Kaido to get many dimensions, so that no one will be willing to follow Kaido. After all, they can follow other more powerful core cadres to gain a huge dimension and make themselves stronger. Baby J. And Kaido will be forced into an endless loop. However, the powerful strength displayed by Kaido's right-hand man, Flame Calamity, helped Kaido's team obtain more dimensional distribution rights. And the most important thing is that the fighting power shown by the Flames also attracted many ordinary members of the Locks Pirates. At this time, Golden Lion shook his head slightly, and said, "It seems that we still underestimated this too much. I didn't expect him to win such a small quilt with great potential without making a sound." Quote. Whitebeard said with a blank face, "The most special thing is that this guy Kaido is probably going to use the Winged Birdman in front of him as a breakthrough and start to open up the predicament in front of him. As long as the strength shown by Yan Calamity can attract some ordinary crew members to join, then, coupled with the strong performance of Kaido of the Beasts in the battle, then the team of Kaido of the Beasts will slowly enter a state of healthy development. Middle. And the plan of many core cadres to jointly suppress Kaido will be completely and directly broken. And all this is something that no one thought of at all." At this moment, Charlotte Linlin gritted her teeth and said, "Damn it, how could I remember that this Birdman was already in my team a long time ago? Kaido, did this guy take this Birdman with him when he left? .191 Inevitable things." At this moment, Charlotte Linlin was staring closely at the battle scene in front of her, with a look of unwillingness on her face. She suddenly realized that after losing Kaido, she seemed to have lost many subordinates with the same great potential. The key point is that Charlotte Linlin is very afraid that this is just the beginning. In the future, maybe more people in her team will directly join the team of Kaido of the Beasts. At this moment, Akoku subconsciously said, "Charlotte Linlin, are you starting to regret it again? Are you regretting that you didn't win over Kaido?" At this time, Golden Lion and the others who were standing aside couldn't help laughing. Because Kaido left directly from Charlotte Linlin's banner, it was mentioned many times by many cadres of the Locks Pirates. Charlotte Linlin has long been recognized as a sightless person among the Locks Pirates. It is precisely because of this that the number of ordinary members who are willing to join Charlotte's team has become less and less recently. During the years of fighting in the Locks Pirates, the attrition of a large number of internal members is still very high. Because of this, the Lux Pirates will recruit a new batch of trainee crew members every once in a while. The first test for those who have just joined the Locks Pirates is to survive the upcoming battle. If there is no corresponding strength, it is impossible to survive on the battlefield. Because the fighting style of the Locks Pirates has always been to charge continuously. Advertisement. The intensity of this shock could also help the Locks Pirates select the best members for them. If the strength has not reached the corresponding level, there is no qualification to be a member of the Locks Pirates. This time, even Whitebeard on the side couldn't help laughing and said, "Charlotte, Linlin, there are too many jokes between you and Kaido due to accidents. Now Kaido has shown unparalleled potential, and his men have been on the corresponding stage. As the strength of Kaido and their team continues to grow, there will be more and more opportunities for you to meet him. It's all things that you simply can't escape." At this time, Charlotte Linlin curled her lips slightly, and then said, "I won't bother you about these things. At the very least, Kaido and I also had a past love affair. Unlike you, we are simply strangers." After Charlotte Linlin fully realized Kaido's corresponding potential, although she hated him to death in her heart, she still put on a very harmonious appearance on the surface. After all, among the Locks Pirates, each team also has a corresponding circle. For example, Golden Lion and Whitebeard have always been mixed together, but Charlotte and Linlin often act independently because of their own particularity. And Captain John, Akoku and Silver Axe are often together. Because of this, Charlotte Linlin didn't get angry at all at this time, but instead established the situational relationship between her and Kaido in a serious manner. The faces of the people present changed slightly. They suddenly realized that what Charlotte Linlin said was very reasonable. .192 A powerful counterattack. In any case, Charlotte Linlin once had a corresponding relationship with Kaido. Perhaps Charlotte Linlin and Kaido will be natural allies if there is a corresponding interest competition between their major teams in the future. At this time, Locks looked at the scene in front of him with a smile, and didn't have any thoughts of stopping or interrupting. Locks knew very well that it was impossible for all the core 423 cadres present to fight for the entire Locks pirates wholeheartedly. Therefore, under such circumstances, Locks hopes that the relationship between them will become incompatible, and a real war may break out at any time. And what Locks wants is only for the two sides to use their full strength when facing a common enemy, no matter whether their purpose of doing so is for profit or other things. All of this is very important to Locks is not important. All he wants is the Locks pirates, who can continue to win on the sea. On the other side, when many core cadres of the Locks pirates were watching Kaido's battle, many of the latest newspapers suddenly floated down from the sky. Locks frowned instinctively, then grabbed a newspaper. In the early days, the news agency represented by Morgans was distributing newspapers all over the world. However, for the sake of newspaper sales and occupation, a large number of newspapers will be randomly scattered in places where crowds appear. Of course, because the production cost of these newspapers is close to zero, I didn't think of collecting a certain amount of money in this way. Advertisement. Of course, within the scope of the whole world, there will always be some generous people who freely sway the corresponding Pele. At this time, Morgans never thought about collecting a lot of profits by selling newspapers. After all, when the news agency was developing in the early stage, what they should do most was to let everyone in the world recognize this newspaper, so as to quickly occupy the entire market, instead of seeking corresponding benefits in the early stage. Just when Locks had just glanced at the largest page on the newspaper, a look of surprise soon appeared on his face. What? This kid dares to do this? He actually wants to completely occupy Alabasta Point Zero directly. At this time, many core cadres of the Locks pirates also saw the news, and the expression of ultimate shock soon appeared on their faces. Because they all know very well that the ownership of the major kingdoms and the corresponding share of offerings are the bottom line of the world government. If it is said that the world government can tolerate the people who were dimensional retrogrades and retreated in the holy land of Mariajoy before, then at this time, what Dean Switzerland and others are doing is completely digging the most important foundation belonging to the world government. Then I saw Captain John at this time, with a complicated look on his face, and said, could it be that Dean Rui 3.5 Ding and his team have already figured it out? How should we deal with what the world government has in hand? Is the Uranus? Otherwise, how dare they stand up and clamor at this time? Even Akoku on the side couldn't help but said, they are totally provoking the world government. Anyway, this time, the world government may have to give them a strong counterattack. 193 The real lunatic. It seems that there will be another good show to watch. At this time, Whitebeard couldn't help but frowned, and said, is the world government going to join forces with Marine again to deal with the Dimension Rebels? During the last war, they have already realized how strong the Dimension Rebels are. This time, how should they prepare? The last time Spandane directly took out the Uranus, it was shown in the end that it seemed to directly blow up the crowd of resource retrogrades. Even so, all the retrogrades in Dimension 10 survived the most. It can be seen from this that how powerful the people of the rebels are. However, in the last battle, all the resource retrogrades were also seriously injured. And they have been in the process of recovering from their injuries in the follow-up. At this time, Golden Lion said with some doubts, I really can't figure out why Dean Riding and the others directly launched provocative actions so quickly. I originally thought that they would at least have to cultivate for a long time before they could appear above the sea again. How long has passed? These guys have completely lost their patience. As for the rest of the cadres of the Locks pirates, their faces were full of anticipation and gloating. What do you guys think about this Dean Riding? Does he want to evacuate and die on the battlefield with the Dimension Rebels? No matter how strong the insiders of Dimensional Retrograde are, it's impossible for them to participate in two large-scale battles in a short period of time. That's right, the Dimensional Retrogrades were already somewhat irresistible the last time they faced Uranus. Advertisement. What I am most looking forward to next is how the Marine and world government will make a strong response to this matter. Charlotte Linlin on the side couldn't help screaming, and said, could it be that this Dean Riding is completely crazy? How could he do such a crazy thing again? The outside world calls our Locks pirates crazy, and I think Dean Riding is much more crazy than us. Unfortunately, he is not a member of our Locks pirates, otherwise his form and style are very close and similar to the Locks pirates. At this time, an extremely complicated look appeared on Locks' face. He also very much wanted to directly pull Dean Riding and everyone under Dean Riding into the Locks pirates. But at present, with events happening one after another, the Dimensional Retrograde is moving in an uncontrollable direction. After all, at this time, even Locks didn't dare to directly and openly start provoking the 893 world government and Marine. And Dean Riding led the resource retrograde people, and directly did something he couldn't imagine. Locks suddenly realized that at this time, Dean Riding seemed to be leading the resource retrogrades to create a new piece of history. After all, no pirate group has ever dared to directly touch the foundation of world government. Sanctuary inside the palace of Mariajoy. I saw the 5 elders members gathered together at this time. The right palm of the curly-haired old man slapped heavily on the table. A slight metallic roar appeared. 0.1945 elders plans, latest information. Then, a clearly visible crack appeared on the surface of the table placed in front of everyone. The curly-haired old man gritted his teeth and said, This Dean writing is completely provoking us, we must issue a response and statement on this matter as soon as possible. Now it is estimated that all kingdoms and forces in the outside world are waiting for our response. The old man with a long beard also said directly, this Dean writing has completely pushed us to the point of no return this time. What is this guy thinking? Have they completely recovered from the last injury? Even the members of the five elders never thought that the people of Dickon writing would directly face the whole world here to start provoking the world government in a very short period of time. After the world government directly took out Uranus last time, Uranus has already given the resource retrograde and others a strong enough threat. Although all the members of the five elders were defeated last time, they still let everyone in the world understand that Wu world government has a very deep foundation. Because they can completely stop for a period of time, I didn't expect that the resource retrograde people would stand up and start debugging so quickly. At this time, the bald old man, holding the first generation goosh in his hand, couldn't help but said, we can't wait any longer. Since the resource retrogrades dare to do such a thing, it shows that they still have a lot of knowledge about this matter. Certainly sure. Another blonde old man said directly, what happened to Alabasta? Advertisement. Why would the country suddenly choose to invest directly in people who are resource retrogrades? What happened in their country? Could it be that the resource retrogrades took the initiative to attack Alabasta? Soon, some members of the five elders who had the same doubts called the spy chief Spandane to the inside of the palace. At this time, Spandane had already expected this scene, so he said with confidence, I have just checked the information on Alabasta. First of all, Alabasta is a desert kingdom with a not-so-prosperous economy, and there seems to be small-scale unrest within their country at any time. And the water resources in that country are very scarce. I don't think the Dimension rebels will completely focus on such a barren country in the first place. Quote. And according to the corresponding news from internal spies, it seems that people from Alabasta contacted the resource retrograde. And, according to the latest news, the resource retrograde seems to be building a new base near Alabasta. When he heard this, a bright Wongda's light flashed in the eyes of the bald old man, and then he said, this damn Dean writing, he really doesn't take us seriously. Since he is going to build a new base, let's set our goal on this new base. In his new base, the moment the complete construction is completed is the moment the base is completely destroyed. Spandine, I will leave this matter to your spy department. 195 a person worth looking forward to. I recall that there seemed to be a large portion of your spy service who were extremely grandmaster blasted. Hearing this, Spandane nodded without hesitation, and said, don't worry, my lord, it's very easy to blow up a so-called base. Just when the celestial dragons on the other side were trying their best to calculate Dean writing. Dean writing has officially arrived in the kingdom of Goa with the Black Dragon Akunologia and Ulquiorra cipher. There is a very interesting person here, so we mainly want to turn him into an affiliated member of the Dimensional Pirates as much as possible. 283. A smile appeared on Dean Writing's face, and he had already started to think secretly in his heart. At this time, the Black Dragon Akunologia and Ulquiorra cipher also had a curious look in their eyes. Because it's the first time they've heard Dean Writing have such admiration for someone they've never met. You know, Dean Writing often stays with them, so for this world, the so-called genius has long since had little expectation. I'm afraid that Lox, the captain of the Lox pirates, doesn't care that much at all, and even looks down on Lox. Otherwise, when Whitebeard invited him, he would have completely joined the Lox pirates directly. Not to mention that Lox also directly invited Dean Writing back then, but was directly rejected by Dean Writing. Advertisement. The three of them moved forward quickly, and soon saw a huge high city wall in front of them. A look of surprise flashed across the face of the Black Dragon Akunologia, and he said, why did Wang Guahui build such a high wall? Wouldn't this directly block the communication between the internal and external personnel? And the existence of this high wall should be very detrimental to the development of the entire kingdom. At this time, Ulquiorra Cipher had a thoughtful look on his face, and said directly, if I am not doing it, I am afraid that the most important purpose of building this wall of high-strength people is to completely isolate internal and external contacts. In other words, he doesn't care whether the development of the entire kingdom will be blocked by this high wall. He just simply doesn't want any connection between the inside and outside. When he heard this, Dean Writing nodded slightly, and said, yes, this wall is called the separation wall. The most important function of this wall is to separate the evacuation of the princes and nobles from the common people, because the princes and nobles think that the common people are very dirty, and they don't want any intersection between the two sides at all. When they heard this, a look of surprise flashed across the faces of Ulquiorra Cipher and the two of them. Let's go. We came to Goa Kingdom this time just to try our luck. Even I am not sure whether we can find that person. This time, Dean Writing came here to find a very powerful swordsman. But whether he can be found, all this is an unknown. Because Dean Writing was interested and curious enough about this guy, he took the opportunity of coming to East Blue this time to investigate. The people Dean Writing was looking for were Shimotsuki and Saburo, who had an unparalleled talent for forging sword 196 waste terminal. Of course, the most important thing is because this guy's descendant is a man named Koshiro. Kosaburo is Koshiro's father, and Koshiro will become a real swordsman in the future, and his own strength will reach an extremely terrifying level. According to Dean Writing's estimation, the current age of Koshiro should have basically reached his teens. Even if he is dead at this age, he may have already shown a terrifying talent for practicing swordsmanship. Dean Riding came here this time just to take away all their leaders. If the dimensional retrograde wants to continue to expand outward, then a highly skilled craftsman is naturally very important to him. What's more, there is a child with unlimited potential beside this craftsman. Both of these men are Dean Riding, the corresponding targets who are currently eyeing. Then, under the leadership of Dean Riding, a group of people began to travel through the entire town. In the end, everyone stayed at a place called the Waste Terminal. When he saw this, Dean Riding had a faint smile on his face, and said, "Anyway, this trip is worthwhile." Just when the three of Dean Riding stepped into it, the faces of the Black Dragon Akunologia and Ulquiorra Cipher changed slightly at the same time. Someone is watching us in the dark. Both Hailong and Hailong had already noticed something was wrong at the same time. Dean Riding nodded slightly, and continued to walk forward with the two of them. Advertisement. When everyone came to the garbage terminal, they saw a large number of people gathered in the open space in front of them. At the same time, the people in the open space immediately turned their eyes to Dean Riding and his party expectantly. Dean Riding took out some Baileys from his arms and placed them directly on the open space in front of everyone. "I hope to find a person, I can only tell you its characteristics, and the rest can only be searched slowly by you." When he heard this, the leading man looked at Bailey in front of him with bright eyes, nodded without hesitation and said, "Don't worry, as long as that person is still in Goa Kingdom, we will be able to find him easily." Quote. Zero looking for flowers. Dean Riding nodded slightly, and led the two black dragons who were full of doubts to leave the garbage terminal directly. Just when they turned into a chewing road, they suddenly heard a dull voice. "There are 3 suitable faces. Since you have met me, you can only blame yourselves for being unlucky, and keep all the Baileys on you. Otherwise, the sharp sword in my hand will make your life worse than death." Dean Riding turned his head and saw a young man in his 20s standing in front of him, with a slightly worn-out knife on his waist. Most striking are the guy's eyes. This pair of eyes is very bright. It is obvious that the guy has always had his own firm goal, and has never changed accordingly. And at this time, the Black Dragon, the two didn't want to make a direct move, but were waiting for Dean Riding to make a choice. The moment they appeared, the two Black Dragons knew very well that the man in front of them couldn't possibly be their opponent B. You can read more daily new novels on fictionzone.net. Both sites shared the same login details, so you don't need to sign up again. S.197 Future Big Pirate. But seeing this situation, Dean Riding didn't have the idea of making a move, so the two of them forcibly suppressed their eagerness to move. Otherwise, just relying on the arrogant words that this man just said, he would have been completely turned into a corpse long ago. "If I'm not mistaken, you should be Nali." Dean Riding spoke slowly with a 237 expression on his face. And at this time, a cheerful smile suddenly appeared on the face of the young Ganali, and then he said, "I didn't expect you, kid, to have heard of my name. Of course, no matter what. Today you have to keep all your belongings. At best, sir, I will let you go undamaged today. From here." Ganali has been waiting here for a long time, and he has done this kind of thing many times, and those people at the waste terminal will sell the corresponding information. And every time Ganali judged the financial resources of the person who bought the intelligence, he would come here and wait directly. As long as he encountered a certain fat sheep, he would take action as soon as possible. Of course, if he encounters some hard problems, Ganali will naturally remain indifferent, and these people who do things will leave. This is a kind of business that Nali has been doing all the time, and this kind of business has saved him a lot of Baileys. As long as he continues to hold these back forces, maybe it won't be long before he can directly realize his ultimate goal. Ganali also wanted to leave here, but according to his current strength and financial resources, he couldn't do all of this at all. He couldn't even buy a ship. At this time, Dean Riding had a faint smile on his face. Advertisement. The guy in front of him named Ganali will become Luffy's benefactor in the future. If it wasn't for Ganali, I'm afraid the 3 brothers Luffy, Ace and Sabo would have been completely killed by ferocious beasts long ago. And this guy is currently a young man, and it won't be long before he will really embark on the road of pirates. In the original book, this guy is a powerful existence who can directly confront Luogia in the future. Of course, this guy was directly defeated by Luogia in the end. 0. Although Dean Riding did not find Kazaburo as he wished this time, nor did he take Koshiro into his pocket by the way, but after seeing Ganali, his thoughts had already produced some waves. At least this guy, as a famous big pirate in the future, is still qualified to be an affiliated member of Dimensional Retrograde. Of course, if this person wants to become a true core member, he must wait for him to fully grow up before he can have the corresponding qualifications. Why do you want so many Baileys? With your strength, you shouldn't be so poor that you can't even afford food. Dean Riding looked at Nali in front of him with a deliberate smile. At this time, Ganali 2.0 had a calm look on his face, and said without hesitation, "I want to go to sea, and no one can stop me from raising enough money to buy my own sea. Thieves," and stepped into the sea. "My goal is the sea, and my life will only be spent in the sea. And the funds in your hands will become the corresponding source of funds for me to purchase the pirate ship. 198 Fake and shoddy, strange and weird." When they heard this, the Black Dragon Akunologia and Ulquiorra Cipher looked at each other, and they both saw the astonishment in each other's eyes. They thought that Nali was just trying to grab a lot of money, but they didn't expect that Nali was working harder to go to sea at this time. The most exaggerated thing is that this guy Ganali actually stared at the 3 of them directly. At this time, Ulquiorra Cipher couldn't help but said, "Didn't you watch the live broadcast to the whole world that took place in the holy land of Mary Ten Hoya some time ago?" Hearing this, Ganali curled his lips in disdain, and said, "Of course I watched it, but so what? Don't you three really think that you only need to wear the costume of the Dimension Retrograde and act like a with the same posture as the core crew of the Resource Retrograde? You can bluff me. To tell you the truth, in just half a month, I have already met several groups of people who also pretend to be Dimensional Retrogrades. Do you know what happened to those imposters?" When he said this, Ganali even started to crack his fist, and the bones kept making crackling sounds. "Those people were all beaten up by me, and there was no intact part of their bodies. After they go back, they have to lie on the hospital bed for at least half a year before they can get out of bed and move around normally." When they heard this, the three black dragons including Dean Riding had strange expressions on their faces. Then I never thought that someone would directly pretend to be a member of Dimension Retrograde. And when these pretenders caused the core crew members of the real Resource Retrogrades to appear in front of outsiders, no one believed their identities. At this time, Dean Riding showed a smile that was not a smile, and said directly, "It is actually very simple to prove this point." Advertisement. The next moment, a berserk aura rose directly into the sky. The Conqueror's Haki that was brewing inside Dean Riding's body spread directly to the surroundings, and Nali, who was standing opposite Dean Riding, was the first to bear the brunt. Boom. Accompanied by a huge roaring sound, a look of extreme horror soon appeared on Ganali's face at this time. He could sense a violent breath constantly oppressing his body. Click. A golden sound appeared, and cracks began to appear on the surface of the ground that Ganali stepped on. Under the strong pressure formed by the Conqueror's Haki in Dean Riding's body, Nali's body was slowly sinking deeper into the ground. Within a few seconds, Ganali's calf was completely under the ground. What happened in such a short period of time made Xiaona unable to come up with any countermeasures. Are you really people who are dimensional retrogrades? At this moment, Gnarly woke up suddenly. He thought that his force could still be on the stage, but he didn't expect to stand in front of the three of Dean Riding, but he didn't even have the slightest chance to resist. Coupled with the clothes of the three of Dean Riding, the corresponding thought flashed through Ganali's mind immediately, so Ganali couldn't wait to ask on the spot. 199 Apprentice Crew, show your strength. And at this time, Dean Riding always smiled, looking at Nali in front of him. Ganali on the side hurriedly threw the long knife in his hand on the ground, and then frantically began to draw it out of his pocket. In the end, Ganali directly took out a small stack of reward orders. And the reward order officially belongs to all members of the retrograde dimension. At this time, Ganali also completely matched the faces of the three of Dean Riding and the reward orders through the reward orders one after another. Then, Ganali was completely stunned, and said in a trembling voice, "Are you really people who are dimensional retrogrades? How did the people from Dimension Retrograde come here? How do ordinary people know that the Dimensional Retrograde will build a new base in the entire East Blue? Unless there are many kingdoms and forces that have been paying attention to the corresponding news, ordinary civilians don't care about all this at all." Pat. The long knife in Ganali's hand fell directly to the ground, and he didn't even know how to deal with the situation in front of him. But at this time, Dean Riding couldn't help but started to laugh, and then said, "Since you want to enter the sea so much, why not join our Dimensional Retrograde? Of course, you have to say what you want to say first. Now you can only be regarded as an apprentice crew member. After your strength reaches a new stage, as long as you can pass our assessment, you can become a real crew member." Advertisement. When he heard this, Ganali had a look of ecstasy on his face, and then couldn't help but said, I am willing to join you." For Ganali, everything in front of him is simply picturesque. After all, he had also watched the live broadcast battle that took place in the holy land of Mariajoy and was broadcast to the whole world. And he is also very clear about how powerful Dean Riding and others are. In this case, he can't be the opponent of Dean Riding and others at all. And Ganali once thought about whether he could directly join the Dimensional Retrograde, but he knew that all this could only be a fantasy. However, all these seem to have become corresponding facts now. Faced with this sudden good fortune, how could Nali hesitate directly? At this time, the Black Dragon Akunologia and Ulquiorra Cipher didn't know why Dean Riding directly invited this guy, but Dean Riding had already spoken, so they naturally didn't have any opinions. What's more, Ganali at this time has only become a trainee crew member of the Dimension Retrograde. If he wants to become a real crew member, he may have to go through a series of tests. The most important thing is that the current dimensional inspection team has also been established, and after a certain period of time has passed, those who perform outstandingly will also become new trainee crew members. Good Jiao good. Therefore, at this time, the two Black Dragons have already made corresponding psychological preparations to welcome new members and join the dimensional retrogrades. However, even so, the Black Dragon Akunologia on the side couldn't help but said, "Apprentice crew, use your strongest strength to attack me. Let me see your strength. What stage are you in now?" Hearing Ganali here, the expression of the whole person quickly became excited. 200 The Black Dragon's test. He understood that this was the final test of a true core crew member. If the strength he displayed at this time cannot satisfy everyone, then even if he can still become a new trainee crew member, he will definitely be looked down upon by the Black Dragon Akunologia at the premise. Thinking of this, Ganali took a deep breath, and then tightly held the long knife in his hand. But at this time, Dean Riding and Ulquiorra Cipher were very interested, looking at the scene in front of them. At this time, Dean Riding was also very curious about the current strength of Nali 077. Acceptance Dean Riding is very clear that according to the normal rhythm, Nali will become a real powerhouse in the future. But at least at this time, Ganali is still slowly growing up. In the future, Ganali will be able to directly confront Luo Jia. But at this time, Luo Jia had already grown up and Grenali was still in the rhythm of growth. It is also because of this that Dean Riding is very curious at the moment. As soon as the battle started, the Black Dragon Akunologia said calmly, "Go ahead. Remember, show your true strength." At this time, Ganali is also very clear that if the Black Dragon is allowed to do it, there is no possibility that he will survive a single blow. Ganali took a deep breath, let out a roar, and then jumped into the air. Advertisement. At the same time, Ganali even directly abandoned the long knife in his hand at this time, and used his fists to attack. Because at this time, Nali suddenly realized that the quality of his weapons was very low. Instead of using this completely useless weapon to fight, it would be better to show his own strong strength in front of Dean Riding and others. However, just when Ganali's fists were about to hit the Black Dragon Akuno, Bod Kea. The Black Dragon just stretched out a finger, and lightly touched the surface of Nali's fist. Boom. The next moment, a dull voice sounded, and Ganali's whole body fell towards his back like a cannonball. Boom. Accompanied by a huge roaring sound, Nali's body threw out a deep pit of his servants directly above the ground. At this time, the Black Dragon Akunologia only used a negligible amount of physical strength today. At this time, Ganali quickly got up directly, and said darkly and firmly, "Sooner or later, I will become stronger than you." At this time, Ganali, after being fully aware of the strength gap between the two sides, did not continue to attack relentlessly. Because just now he has shown all the power he can show, and although this power cannot be compared with the Black Dragon Akunologia, it can already be regarded as a pirate with a bounty exceeding 20 million Baileys. Not because he is too weak, but because the Black Dragon Akuno Loki is too strong. The original Black Dragon Akuno Nokia could easily defeat the existence of 5 elders, not to mention that during this period of time, the body of the Black Dragon has been constantly adapting to this world, and its own strength has also been growing by leaps and bounds. Compared. 201 Grenali's good luck. At this time, the Black Dragon Akunologia, after making a corresponding judgment based on Ganali's age and physical strength, said softly, "Your strength and physical strength can barely be counted at this age. It's just that if you want to become a real crew member of Dimension Retrograde, you need to put in more effort." And Ganali, who heard this, nodded heavily, also agreeing with the idea of the Black Dragon Akunologia. After all, she never thought that the power gap between the Black Dragon and him would be so great. Half an hour later, Dean Riding was still wandering the streets with a group of people. At this time, Nali couldn't help but said, "Dean Riding, where should we go next? Are we going to trouble other pirates?" Dean Riding couldn't help laughing when he heard this, and said, "Our destination this time is here, besides waiting, and our main purpose this time is to build a real base near Alabasta. But have you ever heard of a man named Shimotsuki Kozaburo?" At this time, Ganali flashed a look of astonishment on his face, and then said, "Shimotsuki Kozaburo, is this guy strong? Why have I never heard of his name?" Nali knew very well that although he didn't know the person's name, at least the person's name could be mentioned in Dean Riding's mouth, which showed that Dean Riding attached great importance to this guy. What's more, after a series of trials, Nali suddenly discovered that the main goal of Dean Riding's coming here this time was to find this guy named Shimotsuki Kozaburo. In this way, Gnarly's whereabouts have become more anticipated for Shimotsuki Kozaburo. Advertisement. While Dean Riding taught Nali various hockey cultivation methods, he also gave him guidance on the direction of corresponding strength cultivation at certain critical moments. In this way, the two sides continued to search in the kingdom of Goa, and Yegnarly's strength also continued to occur, growing by leaps and bounds. After all, sometimes, when the Black Dragons Akunologia and Urkihoraxika couldn't stand it anymore, they would directly teach him. Zero looking for flowers. With the teaching of these 3 top powerhouses, Ganali's strength has undergone earth-shaking changes within half a month. During this period of time, Xiaozhi even directly cultivated armament hockey to the stage where he could use it flexibly. This also caused a look of ultimate excitement to appear on Ganali's face. Asterisk 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 asterisk. At this time, Ganali stretched out his right hand, and the surface of his right hand was completely covered by the rich black armament hockey. Is this armament hockey? Is this an attack that can counter Devil Fruit's abilities? Gnarly's eyes became extremely bright. At this time, Dean Riding stepped forward, patted Ganali on the shoulder lightly, and said, "You just cultivated armament hockey to the entry stage. If you want to use armament hockey to deal with the attack of demon fruit power, you need to pay a lot of effort and time. Now you are still far, far away. 202 Yixin Dojo in Shimotsuki village. Not everyone can directly deal with demon fruit power after learning armament hockey. If armament hockey's strength does not reach a certain stage, the blessing of his own ability cannot rise to a new stage at all. This means that armament hockey, which is too thin, cannot affect the elementalization of fruit-capable users at all." Under such circumstances, Ganali followed Dean Riding while practicing, 870, and began to search throughout the Goa kingdom. They have even been to various small villages, and no one in the university has heard of the existence of Shimotsuki Kozaburo. Even the Black Dragon Akunologia frowned slightly at this time, and said, "Dean Riding, are you sure that guy is really here? While along the way no one seemed to have heard the guy's name at all. Ulquiorra Cipher was also a bit puzzled. They even used observation hockey directly as they went along. However, even so, there is no trace of Shimotsuki Kozaburo at all. Dean Riding also had a thoughtful look on his face, and said softly, could it be that guy has left Goa Kingdom? At this moment, there was a sound of footsteps, and some guys from the waste terminal suddenly came in front of Dean Riding and others. The leading man said excitedly, we found the name of the person you mentioned. Advertisement. According to our knowledge, a ship from an unknown sea once came to the kingdom of Goa, and many people in samurai uniforms directly entered the kingdom. And one of the samurai's name is indeed Gen Saburo. Upon hearing this, Jonin couldn't help flashing a moved look on Dean Riding's face, and asked, where is that guy now? At this time, the man suddenly fell silent, with an eager smile on his face. When he saw this, Dean Riding couldn't help but rolled his eyes, and then threw out another pile of Baileys. Dean Riding had already thought of it from the very beginning, the idea of letting these guys search for the corresponding information. 0. And Dean Riding attaches great importance to it, and a corresponding deal has been reached. As long as these guys didn't break the rules, Dekong Riding naturally couldn't attack them directly. Moreover, these guys were able to find traces of Shimotsuki Kozaburo without Dean Riding and others being able to do so, which is enough to prove that these guys still have merit. After getting the money, the leading man said excitedly, according to the latest news we got, that guy stayed in Goa Kingdom for a while and then left directly, and now she should be staying in this on the island. As he said that, the man directly took out a very detailed map that had been prepared for 0.0 a long time ago. Pointing to a small island on the map, he said, that guy seems to have opened a so-called swordsmanship hall called Yixin Dojo on this small island. Furthermore, the establishment of this swordsmanship hall seems to have made this small island prosperous, and many people even went there admiringly. Therefore, many civilians also support this dojo very much. 203 Crisis comes. If we hadn't accidentally learned this news from a passerby, we would never have known that such a guy existed on a small island. And because of the existence of this guy, it seems that the village inside that small island has completely changed its name. That village seems to be called Shimotsuki Village now. When he heard this, Dean Riding showed a faint smile on his face, and said, Shimotsuki Village. I should have thought of it earlier. Dean Riding, the Way of Nature, Yixin Gymnasium, and Shimotsuki Village exist, but at this moment, 10 is at least 40 or 50 years away from Zoro's apprenticeship. Therefore, Dean Riding is now constantly asking everyone on the road if they have heard of Shimotsuki's name. But maybe because Yixin Taoist Temple has just been established, although the whole village has been renamed because of them, the reputation of this village has not been spread far and wide. In addition, this village exists on a small island, and even fewer people know their names. And that's why Dean Riding couldn't get the news. In the entire kingdom of Goa, there are absolutely very few people who know this news. Since Dean Riding couldn't ask every member of the Goa kingdom in detail, he naturally had no way of knowing the existence of this Shimotsuki village. From the mouth of the person in front of them, Dean Riding and others also learned that Koshiro is now about 7 or 8 years old, and has already shown the corresponding talent in learning kendo at a young age. Jonin couldn't help flashing a smile on the face of the Black Dragon Akunologia, and said, it seems that we can finally get in touch with this person who makes you very interested, Dean Riding. Advertisement. Volkiola Cipher couldn't help but burst into a smile, and then said, at that time, we can test his strength and see what level he can reach. Even Dean Riding admired Kozaburo very much. If this guy wants to join the Dimensional Retrograde and become their real member, he must pass the corresponding test. After all, judging from Dean Riding's current attitude, it is obvious that Dean Riding wants to accept Shimotsuki Kozaburo as the real success of the Dimension Retrograde. Then, a group of people came directly to the direction of the ship. Dean Riding and the others didn't give orders, but at this time, Nali directly began to take the initiative to control a relatively simple ship. Seeing the Black Dragon here, there was a faint smile on the faces of the two of them. In any case, this Ganali still seems to have the self-knowledge of encountering at present. In Shimotsuki village on the other side, more than 20 children who are only about 7 or 8 years old this year and wearing corresponding 960 costumes started crazy training in the field. Many children are all sweating, but the look in their eyes is very firm. It is also enough to see that the training method of this gymnasium is still very advanced, and the training method is still very commendable. After all, how do children at this age understand these messy things? The owner of this dojo can let these children feel at ease to train, it is already very good. 11:11. And at this time, a young man stood aside, his face full of kindness. 204 Unknown visitor. This person is none other than Shimotsuki Kozaburo. At this time, Shimotsuki Kozaburo looked at these disciples who belonged to him in front of him. His face was very satisfied, and at the same time, he was also very looking forward to it in his heart. Because according to his previous practice experience, if he proceeds step by step, all of this will develop in a better direction. At this moment, Shimotsuki Kozaburo's face suddenly changed, and then he suddenly looked to the right. And the many young children who were originally in the training state also reflected it, and their faces were full of worries. Because this small island is often attacked by people from the outside world. Although the existence of the gym has made this small island more prosperous, it has also made the economic income of the common people living here much higher. But every once in a while, there will always be some people who rush to attack without hesitation, and every time the people in their gymnasium must come forward. As their master, Shimotsuki Kozaburo bears the brunt, and Shimotsuki Kozaburo barely helps the entire island by virtue of his own strength. But they also understand that the number of people who have come to attack this small island has become more and more recently. If this continues, relying on their master alone will not be able to hold back so many terrifying strong men. According to the current situation of Shimotsuki Kozaburo, it is obvious that there should be new invaders coming. Directly at this moment, Shimotsuki Kozaburo's face was full of jealousy. Advertisement. Under the perception of the witness hockey, he can easily detect that there are top powerhouses approaching here. Shimotsuki Kozaburo has cultivated observation hockey to an extremely deep level. Because of this, he can keenly perceive that there are three beast-like guys approaching here at this moment. And when facing these three unknown guys, he couldn't come up with any means of resistance at all. Did those guys come? Pipe question mark quote. Shimotsuki Kozaburo's face became very ugly. At this moment, Kozaburo directly drew out the wooden sword on the side, staring at the direction of the front door from time to time. Then, footsteps started to sound, and four figures appeared directly in front of Shimotsuki Kozaburo. A look of relief flashed across Shimotsuki's face when he saw his own people who suddenly appeared in front of him. He didn't see any signs of samurai in the first few days, so he can be sure that at least these people are not from Wano-kuni. He escaped from Wano-kuni. If Wano-kuni's people had chased him here, it would be very difficult for him to escape unscathed today. At this time, a faint smile appeared on Dean Riding's face. He has already judged clearly the identity of the person in front of him. This guy is definitely Shimotsuki Kozaburo. Li Liao Jiao, although this guy only has this one in his hand, which is an ordinary wooden sword for practice, but the classification aura on the surface of his body is very prominent. Moreover, the muscles on the surface of this guy's body have already been completely caged, and he can directly enter the combat state to patrol at any time. Of course, the main reason is that the look in this guy's eyes is very sharp, which to Dean Riding is like a bright light in the dark. 205 The persistence of the furnace sealer. Even the Black Dragon and Ulquiorra Cipher at this time were looking at Shimotsuki Kozaburo in front of them, with a look of interest on their faces. This guy looks good. No wonder Dean Riding you go straight to this guy. This guy is really interesting. His strength should be able to stand on the stage. At this time, Dean Riding always had a faint smile on his face, and said, Shimotsuki Kozaburo, we came here without any malice. I just want to see your forging technology 017. When he heard this, Shimotsuki Kozaburo's eyes were full of fear. Dean Riding directly revealed his identity at the first time, obviously, and should be very clear about his past experience. But when Dean Riding came here, he just wanted to learn about the so-called forging technology, all of which sounded very unreasonable. You mean you want me to forge a weapon for you? If that's what you're here for, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. I've already, made up my mind that I won't make any more weapons. And hearing the Black Dragon Akunologia and Ulquiorra Cipher here, the two looked at each other, and both saw the smile in each other's eyes. I didn't expect this guy's temper to be a bit stubborn. He clearly recognized the situation on the court, but he still refused to back down. Such a person can be regarded as having a little persistence, but unfortunately his persistence is meaningless. Advertisement. For Hailong and others, no matter what reason Shimotsuki Kozaburo stopped casting weapons, since Dean Riding has brought them to the door and made corresponding demands. Then, it is impossible for Kozaburo to refuse to evacuate. At this time, Dean Riding also sat on the seat beside him without hesitation, with a faint smile on his face. Seeing this, Shimotsuki Kozaburo's expression changed slightly, and then he directly gestured to Koshiro at the side. Koshiro, who is only 7 or 8 years old this year, quickly left the dojo with many children who were training. They have seen such a scene many times. According to their estimates, the next battle should be between Shimotsuki Kozaburo, Dean Riding and others. And if they continue to stay on the scene, it is very likely that Shimotsuki Kozaburo will not be able to shoot unscrupulously because of their identities. After all, if Shimotsuki Kozaburo's opponents are in desperation, it is very likely that they will directly hold them hostage to threaten Kozaburo. Therefore, it is the most normal choice for Shimotsuki Koshiro to leave here with many children practicing swords in the dojo. Shimotsuki Kozaburo, I don't care what happened to you that night, do you want to stay here forever? And to put it bluntly, if it weren't for your strength in forging weapons, we probably wouldn't be here today. As for your own combat power, you don't need to show it. That so-called combat power is meaningless to us. Before that, I hope to see that you can come up with a real forging technology that is enough to satisfy us. 206 The change of the system, the importance of Kozaburo. After all, a person who can create real weapons is indeed qualified to be recognized by us. Hearing Dean Riding's arrogant words, an angry look flashed across Shimotsuki's face. For so many years, he can be crushed by many people in terms of strength, but no one has ever dared to underestimate his forging technology. If it wasn't because he sensed a serious life threat from Dean Riding and others, he might have shot directly when Dean Riding and others just opened their mouths. As if aware of Shimotsuki Kozaburo's emotional changes, Dean Riding did not continue to force him, but stood up directly, led the crowd towards the door, and said, I can give you some time to think about it. But you'd better think through all this quickly, otherwise, whether it's the people in Shuangyu village or the rest of the people on this small island, they will completely undergo earth-shaking changes because of your decision. When he heard this, Dean Riding didn't pay attention to Shimotsuki Kozaburo, who had a smear of anger on his face at the moment, but turned around and left the scene directly. Dean Riding probably also knows the reason why Shimotsuki Kozaburo is unwilling to forge weapons directly. After all, this guy once got into trouble because of forging weapons. But what Dean Riding valued the most was this guy's stone-making skills. If he still couldn't bow his head, then Dean Riding could only use the rest of the Yixin dojo to threaten him. After all, Dean Riding is not sure enough to impress this so-called Shimotsuki Kozaburo directly through corresponding means. You must know that the willpower of a person who can spend a long time studying forging technology is extremely high. Advertisement. After all, not only those who can wield a sledgehammer can directly forge truly peerless weapons. You know, the famous sword Enma once cast by Shimotsuki Kozaburo has always been highly respected above the sea. Now that this knife even fell directly into the hands of Kazuki Oden, it is enough to show that this guy is already beyond ordinary people in forging skills. If Shimotsuki Kozaburo has been stubborn, then Dean Riding can only use some special methods to achieve his goals. Zero looking for flowers. Then, Dean Riding and the Black Dragon Akunologia and his group began to wander around the island. They often come to this dojo, but they don't bother Shimotsuki Kozaburo to teach swordsmanship. The Black Dragon Akunologia couldn't help but nodded, and said, this Shimotsuki Kozaburo is not only good at forging, but also seems to have a skill or two in teaching his apprentices. Also, have you found the 7 or 8-year-old kid in the crowd? His talent in seeing seems to be far ahead of these peers. The Black Dragon Akunologia is eyeing Shimotsuki Koshiro, who is also training in the crowd. Even Ulquiorra Cipher on the side nodded slightly. This kid's talent is not bad. But a genius who hasn't grown up is meaningless to us. What the current dimension retrogrades don't need the so-called cultivation genius that takes a long time to cultivate, what they need is the most powerful combat power. Point 207 living together in harmony. The current dimension retrograde also has many enemies on the sea, not to mention, world government marine has been trying to directly destroy the dimension retrograde. They also don't have enough time to cultivate some so-called young geniuses now. This may be the reason why Dean Riding came directly to Shuangyu village to invite Kozaburo. In addition to Kozaburo's impressive combat effectiveness, the most important thing for Zero Sanchi is that he can forge a large number of special weapons. And the output of this kind of weapon, once it comes up, will definitely be able to quickly increase the corresponding strength of the rest of the crew who will join the dimensional retrograde. After all, the selection of the internal personnel of the inspection team has officially started, and it won't be long before a group of people with excellent performance in the inspection team will directly become the trainee crew members of the dimension retrograde. And once these people can become regulars, then they can get the corresponding famous sword forged by Shimotsuki Kozaburo. During this time, the 4 of Dean Riding and the children inside got along very well and harmoniously. Because according to Dean Riding's previous judgment, since these guys can become Kozaburo's disciples and have been trained to this point, their own talents are also commendable. Although they may not be as talented as Shimotsuki Koshiro, they have been able to persist until this point, and they have already surpassed ordinary peers. And because Shimotsuki Kozaburo, this guy's teaching talent is very outstanding, so the future of these disciples under Kozaburo can be expected. It is also because of this that Dean Riding currently regards these children as dimensional retrogrades and future trainee members. Advertisement. When the strength of these guys has reached above the sea, when the strength of the real big pirates, the dimensional retrograde will naturally become their first choice. And at this moment, after a period of training was over, many children surrounded Dean Riding and began to ask questions constantly. Brother Black Dragon, can you really turn into a very long black dragon? But aren't you human? Why can you become so terrifying? Brother Black Dragon, what is the name of your devil fruit? Brother Black Dragon, why are you dimensional retrogrades so strong? During the time they were staying, the identities of Dean Riding and the others had already been known by everyone at the scene. 0. Because of this, Shimotsuki Kozaburo knew very well that it was impossible for him to forcefully drive away Dean Riding's people, because he simply did not have such strength. In this situation, Shuangyu and Sanwan can only pretend that nothing happened at all. And the most important thing is that the Black Dragon Akunologia seems to like these children surprisingly, and often hangs out with them, and also uses Kujong to satisfy some of their curiosity. In addition, Ulkio 4.5 La Cipher will also respond to children's questions from time to time. But Ganali didn't have any affection for the children in front of him. This is fundamentally different from his future appearance. You know, according to the records in the original book, when this guy saw many members of the Straw Hat Pirates who were not too old, he immediately had a little affection and showed corresponding kindness. 208 Exposure of identity. At this moment, Ganali said helplessly, are these guys really pirates? I've never seen pirates be able to do what they are doing now. Ganali never thought that the extremely powerful Black Dragon and others would be willing to stay with a group of children all day long. Nali didn't expect that a powerful person like Dean Riding would be willing to wait for Shimotsuki Kozaburo to make a corresponding choice. According to Ganali's idea, if Shimotsuki Kozaburo disagrees, he can directly take 10 of his life as a threat, and at worst, he can use his son's life as a corresponding threat chip. Since Shimotsuki Kozaburo had worked so hard to bring his son to this place, naturally it was to save the lives of both of them. And it can also be seen that Shimotsuki Kozaburo should value his son very much. Otherwise, the two of them would not have come to this remote place with so much trouble. You know, they were originally samurai who belonged to Wanokuni, and the location and terrain of Wanokuni are naturally very convenient, and today Wanokuni is also an extremely powerful country. If it is not desperate, how could this guy be willing to leave a powerful country and come to such a remote place? At this time, Shimotsuki Kozaburo was watching everything that happened in the yard, with a look of extreme helplessness on his face. After Shimotsuki Kozaburo completely cleared the identity of Dean Riding and others, he completely understood that he has no right to reject Dean Riding and others. Advertisement. Because Dean Riding and others can directly use their absolute strength to crush him at any time. Shimotsuki Kozaburo has enough confidence to protect the island from ordinary children, but he doesn't have any confidence at all when facing the crowd of Dimension Rebels. The Dimensional Rebels have already shown their mighty strength under the gaze of everyone in the world. Even the world government and marine may not be able to crush the Dimensional Retrogrades, let alone himself. Then Shimotsuki Kozaburo walked up to Dean Riding helplessly, and said, I promise, I can forge weapons for you. When hearing this, Dean Riding and the others all showed a faint smile on their faces. They are actually taking a very clever approach. The three of Dean Riding knew their identities, and it was impossible to hide them forever. After all the wanted warrants are now walking around. In the situation where Dean Riding and the others have no intention of hiding, these Shimotsuki Kozaburo will soon understand all this. After knowing their identities, where does Zheng Zulong come from to reject them with the confidence and courage of 360? Shimotsuki Kozaburo had gone through a lot of hardships to take his son out of danger. How could he be willing to set up such a thing and lose his own life? Compared with life, the so-called vows made without consequences are nothing more than that. What's more, Shimotsuki Kozaburo is a forging master with a very superb memory. After so many years, how could he really put down all the forging techniques? There was a smile on Dean Riding's face, and then he said, no problem, then, everything will be done according to your way. 209 Batch Manufacturing. At this time, Shimotsuki Kozaburo's face became a little serious, and then he said, although I don't know why you came to me for forging weapons. But I must tell you clearly that forging weapons is difficult. S**X. I don't know how much you guys know about my forging technology, but in today's ocean, even if it is a battle master with a superb memory, if he wants to forge a real weapon, then he needs to use the value of the material. It's very expensive, and it's huge in quantity. As he spoke, Shimotsuki Kozaburo directly handed out a list of materials that had been prepared a long time ago. The list of materials is filled with densely packed materials and weights required. Dean Riding was able to see some of the rarer materials just by scanning them lightly. After a little hesitation, Dean Riding said, actually, I personally don't lack weapons. I personally hope that you can produce a dozen large knives with higher quality in batches. Only in this way, many of my future subordinates may be able to quickly equip more precious weapons. When he heard this, a look of astonishment flashed across Shimotsuki Kozaburo's face. She thought that Dean Riding came here to make a real weapon for herself, but she didn't expect that he wanted to make a batch of weapons for his many subordinates. Shimotsuki Kozaburo showed a thoughtful look on his face, and said, if this is the case, then the materials needed for these weapons don't need to be so precious. Just when Shimotsuki Kozaburo was about to remove several of the materials, Dean Riding stopped him with a smile. No need, we have enough dimensions in our hands that should be able to easily meet the internal needs of these material lists. You just need to use your best technology, we will provide unlimited materials, and then it will depend on your own means. Advertisement. The Dimension Retrograde has now received the first batch of Alabasta's Dimension, and as the owner of the fine wine system, the Dimension Retrograde has no shortage of Bailey at all. With sufficient funds, no matter how precious the materials are, they can basically be bought. Even if it cannot be bought, it can be exchanged through other materials. Therefore, collecting materials is indeed not too rare for the task of the Dimension Retrograde. After finalizing this matter, Dean Riding did not continue to discuss with Shimotsuki Kozaburo about joining Dimension Retrograde. In terms of impact, it is obvious that Shimotsuki Kozaburo never made the final decision. Instead of continuing to waste time here, it is better to leave quickly. At least Dean Riding didn't even think about forcing Shimotsuki Kozaburo through strong means. On the second day, Dean Riding, Wang Hao was about to leave with Black Dragon and others. Nali, who heard the news, said excitedly. Dean Riding, we are finally leaving, and I can hardly bear it anymore. This small island is too closed, there is absolutely no need for us to stay here. The Black Dragon Akunologia suddenly said, I think this place is pretty good, and the future of these children is also limitless. 210 Safety of materials. It's a pity that after we leave here, these children may not be able to join the dimensional retrograde in the future. After all, who knows which direction their future life will develop in. 17. Hearing this, Dean Riding also had a thoughtful look on his face. At least according to the current situation, according to the development of things in the original book, in addition to Shimotsuki Koshiro, there will be a follow-up Zoro in Yixin Dojo in the future. Apart from these two people, there is no talent that can be taken out, born directly from this place. 013. Perhaps this is the same as what the Black Dragon Akunologisuo said, and many children who had good potential in the follow-up have gone straight to the wrong path. Then, Dean Riding directly led the crowd to the inside of the dojo, and when the crowd just arrived, a group of children surrounded them directly. After chatting on Twitter, Dean Riding and others finally came to Shimotsuki Kozaburo. We are going to leave here, and the follow-up materials will be delivered here soon. Of course, for the safety of these materials, we will also arrange for relative personnel to be stationed here. I really want to explain to you, mainly because I don't want you to misunderstand. Of course, this is just a polite rhetoric. According to Dean Riding's request, he hopes to build large fast knives in batches. Because of this, the materials needed are a huge astronomical number. And the value of this batch of materials is also very high. Dean Writing naturally needs to leave the corresponding surveillance methods of the dimension retrograde here to ensure that Shimotsuki Kozaburo will not make small moves. Advertisement. On the other hand, Dean Writing also naturally needs to protect this batch of materials. Among other things, if the value of this batch of materials is spread through some accidental channels, it is impossible to protect this batch of materials with the personal strength of Shimotsuki Kozaburo. When Shimotsuki Kozaburo builds weapons, the most important thing is the consumption of materials. After all, in the past, according to his personal strength, he couldn't create many big knives at all. After all, once the building fails, all the materials needed will be wasted. And even if someone came directly to his door, hoping to make weapons, the materials that could be given were very limited. But this time Dean Writing directly opened the unlimited supply, which is naturally very good news for Shimotsuki Kozaburo. Because of this, Shimotsuki Kozaburo didn't even care about the distrust of Dean Writing and others, but nodded with joy. As long as he can get a lot of materials in his hands, then all problems can be directly ignored by this guy. No problem, as long as the materials are available, I can hand over the rest to me. I will make every weapon contain my spirit, and I will try my best to build every weapon. When he heard this, a smile appeared on Dean Writing's face. This is the result he hoped to see. Regardless of whether the current Shimotsuki Kozaburo has made a choice, as long as he can focus on nothing else in the process of building weapons, then this result is acceptable to God Enraiden. Point 211. The next destination, the legendary island. After all, the number of really good weapons above the sea is very limited, and in the process of combat, the quality of weapons will completely affect the final outcome of the entire battle. Therefore, Dean Writing understands very well that the contact with Kozaburo Futsuki this time is very valuable and meaningful. Soon, Dean Writing left the island with a group of people. When everyone came to the surface of the sea again, Ganali's face was full of doubts at this moment. Dean Writing, where is the next goal? Could it be another small island like Shimotsuki village? At this time, Ganali seems to be looking forward to a real battle. In their perception, a powerful pirate group like the Dimension Retrograde is honing itself in continuous battles. But at this time, Dean Writing showed a faint smile on his face. Didn't I just say that we need to give Shimotsuki Kozaburo enough materials for making weapons? Our next step is to find these weapons materials. A look of extreme doubt flashed across Ganali's face when he heard this, and he couldn't help but said, impossible. Will we, the dimensional retrogrades, still lack corresponding resources? In Ganali's knowledge, the dimensional retrograde has long been a very powerful existence above the sea. Moreover, the city of Fine Wine is also the corresponding headquarters of the dimensional retrogrades, so how could the dimensional retrogrades lack the corresponding resources? At this time, the faces of the Black Dragon Akunologia and Ulquiorra Cipher were also somewhat surprised. They are more aware of how much wealth the current dimension retrograde has accumulated. Even if the materials proposed by Shuangyu and Saburo are more precious and the quantity is extremely large, it is absolutely impossible to affect the existing resource reserves of the dimension retrograde. Advertisement. But at this time, Dean Writing showed a faint smile on his face, and said, we happen to come to a very interesting place at this time, and naturally we need to go there. We can just take advantage of this opportunity to get a lot of internal resources. As he said that, Dean Writing directly pulled out a map from the side, pointed to a piece of sea above the map, and said directly, there are 10 very special areas hidden in this place. 0 for flowers. That area has a lot of resources. That area is called Sky Island. When hearing this, the faces of the Jade Emperor's Black Dragons Akunologia and Ulquiorra Cipher were full of doubts. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Neither of them had ever heard of the so-called Sky Island. And since they entered East Blue, they haven't heard the word Sky Island. At this time, Ganali's face showed a strong look of astonishment, and he said, impossible. Isn't Sky Island only in legends? Does this island really exist? Then Ganali began to popularize the corresponding legend about Sky Island to the 2 black dragons present. There is one lucky person, because of a chance experience, after entering the Sky Island, and survived righteously, everything there is gold. When everyone went directly to the island according to what he said, they found that the area had already completely turned into an ocean. Point 212 mission for 2 Marine Vice Admirals. And there are no islands at all. Therefore, everyone thought it was just a legend, and it was just a lie constructed by that lucky guy. Because in the following hundreds of years, no one has ever found this island. The Black Dragon and Ulquiorra Cipher looked at each other, and then directly set their eyes on Dean Writing. They are naturally very 803 clear. Since Dean Writing has said such a thing, I am afraid they have already grasped the corresponding clues. A faint smile appeared on Dean Writing's face, and he said, that's right, I've mastered the corresponding method to Sky Island, so since we've come here, it's naturally impossible to let Sky Island go internal regional resources. And when he heard this, Ganali also showed a strong look of excitement on his face. So the legend turned out to be true. Nali is naturally very clear that it is impossible for a strong man like Dean Writing to casually joke about this kind of thing. Perhaps there are indeed a lot of resources inside Sky Island, but if Dean Writing and others use their full firepower, it is not impossible to quickly plunder the corresponding resources on the sea. Of course, if you choose to obtain resources by plundering, it will naturally take more time and energy. Therefore, Since Dean Writing needs to meet the corresponding material requirements put forward by Shimotsuki Kozuburo, and has already set the target on Sky Island, it is naturally impossible to come up with a lie to deal with everything. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that Shimotsuki Kozuburo's share of the material proposed was too large and Dean Writing, maybe he wouldn't be targeting Sky Island. Advertisement. The batch of resources proposed by Shimotsuki Kozuburo, even if Dean Writing uses the resource reserves of the Dimension Retrograde, is still a huge astronomical figure. And Dean Writing is going to start to expand the corresponding influence of the Dimensional Retrograde on the whole range above the sea. Therefore, the more resources they have, the more they will lose. And under such circumstances, since the Sky Island is approaching, Dean Writing will naturally not let go of a good opportunity to obtain a large amount of resources. 0. Then, under the guidance of Dean Writing, a group of people began to quickly head towards the sea area where Sky Island is located. At the same time, on the other side, a huge warship sailed slowly across the sea. I saw a middle-aged man lying on a recliner, and had temporarily fallen asleep. At this time, there was a man in a purple cloak on the deck, his eyes were like lightning, constantly scanning the sea ahead. And a chief of staff beside him kept reporting their current locations in a low voice. Zephyr Vice Admiral, we have now reached the edge of the coastline not far from the Kingdom of Goa, at most a quarter of an hour before we can directly land on the port of the Kingdom of Goa. The chief of staff looked at Zephyr Vice Admiral in front of him, his face full of fanaticism. Zephyr Vice Admiral is completely different from many existing Marine generals. The rest of the Marine generals were more or less related to the world government or within the Marine. With these connections, they also got the opportunity to be promoted in the most critical competition. Point 213 The Rise of Zephyr. However, Zephyr Vice Admiral is different. Zephyr Vice Admiral was born in the Marine conscription. And Zephyr Vice Admiral at that time was just an ordinary Marine soldier with mediocre strength. However, Zephyr Vice Admiral is naturally fearless of the threat of the battlefield, and will always rush to the forefront on the battlefield. In this way, Zephyr Vice Admiral was quickly promoted from an ordinary Marine soldier to the rank of captain. Then, Zephyr Vice Admiral, as always charged at the forefront in every battle. It is precisely because of this that the rank of Zephyr Vice Admiral began to rise all the way, and finally reached the current level of Marine Vice Admiral. The most surprising thing is that Zephyr Vice Admiral directly created the fastest promotion record in the entire Marine history by virtue of his hard power and illustrious achievements. Moreover, every promotion and every credit obtained by Zephyr Vice Admiral is real. Even if the other generals are very jealous, they can't get any evidence at all. Because of this, Zephyr Vice Admiral has a lot of bases in the entire Marine team. At this time, Garp and others cannot compare with Zephyr Vice Admiral in terms of reputation. Zephyr nodded slightly, then turned his head, looked at Garp who was lying on the recliner, and said helplessly, "You guy, hurry up and wake up, we are going to Goa Kingdom soon." At this moment, Garp started to yawn, stretched slowly, and slowly climbed up. On the other hand, the faces of many Marine soldiers flashed an imperceptible look of disdain. Advertisement. The original Garp is also very good, but compared with Zephyr Vice Admiral, many Marines can naturally see who is better. And because Zephyr Vice Admiral is there, many Marine generals are very eager to start climbing like Zephyr Vice Admiral, completely relying on military exploits to climb up. After all, in the entire Marine team, there are still a lot of people without corresponding backgrounds. And this group of people is also a staunch supporter of Zephyr Vice Admiral. At this time, Garp stretched his waist, then stood up, and said helplessly, "Next time, I will definitely not carry out the mission with you, you are really noisy all the way." The translation at this time, Vice Admiral, said without hesitation, "Only you, a big-hearted guy, can talk non-stop all the way. What if some pirates directly attack us halfway?" At this time, Marines' prestige in the whole world was not that great. Conflicts between pirates and Marines are common occurrences. The overall team of Marine is also in the process of continuous development and is constantly growing. And at this time, Garp's face on the side Jonan couldn't help showing a smile, and said, "It's because of you that I can sleep peacefully." Garp made it very clear that Zephyr Vice Admiral was very conscientious in handling the task. Moreover, Zephyr Vice Admiral is a real deal, raised by his own combat power, so Garp is very clear that with such a person walking with him, there is no need to worry about any unexpected situations. What's more, although he is often in a sleeping state, his own alertness is also very high. 214 Meeting monsters. Especially after Garp cultivated observation hockey to a certain level, he became more sensitive to the disturbances around him. At the same time, on the surface of the sea not far away, Dean Writing frowned slightly at this time before. And the Black Dragon Akunologia and Ulquiorra cipher on the side also noticed the corresponding change. The two black dragons looked at each other, and a smile could not help appearing on their faces. Another interesting guy, it's just that this guy's strength is too weak, he completely makes me unable to arouse any desire to fight. At this time, a smile appeared on Dean Writing's face, and he said directly, "The strength of these two guys has not yet reached the corresponding peak. When the two of us meet next time, the fighting power they have exploded should be enough to satisfy you." The two black dragons couldn't help but began to laugh. It seems that we have to look forward to the growth rate of these two guys. Quote. On the other hand, Ganali was full of confusion the whole time. He had no idea what Dean Writing and the others were talking about. Because with his strength, he couldn't detect the approaching Garp and Zephyr Vice Admiral at all. And at this time, on the other side of the sea, the expressions of Garp and Zephyr Vice Admiral became very solemn in an instant. They also saw Dean Riding and others on the deck in the distance. Advertisement. At this time, the marine personnel who were observing the surrounding situation at any time also directly discovered this scene. Soon, the foreheads of many marines on the entire warship were covered with a lot of sweat. Many people's bodies even began to tremble slightly. People who were rebels in the dimension, why do these monsters appear here? East Blue is not called the weakest sea, why would such a strong person suddenly appear in this area? Did they come here to wait for us? Could it be that we are going to die here completely today? Although many marines present were very confident in Zephyr Vice Admiral and Garp, they also understood that ordinary people simply cannot fight against the many monsters of the retrograde dimension. As the distance between the two sides kept getting closer, many marines saw Dean Riding and others on the opposite deck more clearly. It's a Kunologia, the Black Dragon, and Ulquiorra Cipher, and Dean Riding, the boss of the retrograde dimensions. Quote. It's over, this time, we're really over, and there are 3 monsters, the retrograde dimension, waiting for us here. I'm not willing to die like this, I haven't become a marine field officer yet. At this time, Garp and Zephyr Vice Admiral looked at each other, and they both saw the unwillingness in each other's eyes. They still have a very clear understanding of their own Wang Qinhao strength. When facing these 3 extremely powerful monsters, they have no resistance at all. This is a big trouble, Zephyr, it seems that we may not be able to complete the task smoothly this time. Garp's face became very heavy, and the jet black armament hockey had begun to wrap around the surface of his fists. He could already foresee the serious ending they faced after the battle began. Point 215 An unworthy guy. At this time, Zephyr Vice Admiral also nodded solemnly and said, although these guys are all monsters, it is absolutely impossible for me to admit defeat before the battle is over. My future can't be limited to just here. Soon, the two sides will directly present a face-to-face situation. At this moment, Garp and Garp stared quietly at Dean Riding opposite. Dean Riding, I didn't think we'd run into you guys here. At this time, Dean Riding and the others looked at Garp and Vice Admiral with great interest. If Dean Riding wants to 340, they can completely evacuate and defeat Garp's group in the first place. The corresponding strength that Garp and Zephyr Vice Admiral now have is not enough in front of them. However, at this time, Ganali's face was full of astonishment, and he couldn't help exclaiming, Marine Vice Admiral Garp, damn this guy, why is he here? I saw that Ganali's face was covered with sweat. An existence like him is naturally very wrong to Marine. Not to mention that at this time there is already Garp, Bafe, who is well known in Iron Fist, and Zephyr Vice Admiral, who has shown strong strength. However, Ganali suddenly noticed the 3 of Dean Riding beside him, and he immediately relaxed, and could not help but curse secretly in his heart. I'm so stupid. With 3 real monsters around me, what is a mere Marine Vice Admiral? Because he just joined the dimensional retrograde, Ganali at this time did not completely straighten out his own survival. Advertisement. If Ganali really regarded himself as a member of the retrograde dimension, he would have no fear at all when facing Marine. You know, Marine has always been in the hands of the world government. And the people of the dimension retrograde can even fight the world government head-on, and even directly attack the holy land of the world government's stronghold, Mariajoy. And how could such an existence be afraid of the mere Marine Vice Admiral? Dean Riding said calmly, is it Garp the Fist? Nali, go and try his quality. Upon hearing this, Ganali was completely stunned. He looked at Dean Riding in amazement, and then subconsciously said, boss, he's Garp. For Dean Riding at this time, Garp has naturally become an irrelevant role. But for Nali, Garp's power is still beyond his imagination. At this time, Garp couldn't help but frown tightly, and said, Dean Riding, what do you mean? Do you want this guy who is not worth mentioning to be my opponent? Garp began to keep looking at Nali in front of him, but he couldn't figure out Nali's identity at all. But he has already been able to completely target Ganali through observation hockey, and he has also clearly sensed Ganali's combat power, which is not at the same level as him at all. When the strength continues to rise, one's own physical fitness will naturally soar crazily. At this time, Zephyr Vice Admiral was looking at Nali in front of him with extremely puzzled eyes. He had no idea why Dean Riding would directly want Nali to be Garp's opponent. 216 Guess how long he can last. The two of them are not on the same level at all. At this time, Akunologia saw that Ganali was still unwilling to act, turned around, and said faintly, don't forget that you have now become an absolute member of our dimension retrograde. Quote. Then there is a bottom line that you must abide by, and that is to carry out Dean Riding's orders unconditionally. When he heard this, Ganali's whole body trembled suddenly, and he soon woke up. That's right, I'm already a dimension retrograde. At this moment, Ganali took a deep breath, and then fixed his eyes on Garp in front of him. But at this time, the faces of many Marines present were full of astonishment, and everyone couldn't help but directly set their eyes on Ganali. In everyone's cognition, the strength of everyone who can join the dimensional retrograde is very powerful. However, they couldn't see any characteristics belonging to a strong man from Ganali in front of them. They even took a fancy to Ganali's long, rusty long knife on the side that straddled his waist, and Jonan couldn't help but twitch slightly. Many Marines even started to talk wildly. Just such a well-known, unknown guy, how could he be the opponent of Lord Garp? That's right, such a guy is probably not qualified to have a bounty for encounters above the sea. The unit and such guys will directly obtain the corresponding qualifications to join the Dimension Retrograde. And since he was with Dean Riding just now, how did he get to this point? Advertisement. Many Marines began to frantically look at Ganali in front of them, but they couldn't see anything special at all. At this time, Garp was clearly enraged and roared loudly, Dean Riding, if you want to humiliate me with an unknown guy, then I will do what you wish today, and I will teach him well disguise. Swish. At this time, Garp leapt directly onto the small island beside him. Seeing this, Ganali took a deep breath, knowing that she could no longer shrink back, and charged forward as well. 0 for flowers. As for the remaining Marines, they approached the small island beside them without hesitation. Dean Riding and others watched the situation on the island with great interest. At this moment, the Black Dragon Akunologia said, how long do you think Ganali can last under Garp's hands? 0. Archeola Cypher said with a smile. I guess for a minute at most, his strength is indeed somewhat weak compared to Garp. Garp has already faced the kind of dimensional retrograde, so everyone has already known Garp's true strength. At this time, Dean Riding smiled and said, I bet this guy can last for more than 2 minutes. And on the small island at this moment, Garp's eyes fixed on Nali in front of him, and said, I don't care what the relationship between you and Dean Riding is, I suggest that you take the initiative to set foot on the most battlefields, so today I will never show mercy. At this time, Ganali also completely entered the fighting state, and the muscles all over his body began to tense crazily. 217 Armament Hockey's combat style. And at this time, Ganali was holding a slender sword tightly in his hand. If it weren't for the rusty Madara Madara on the surface of this knife, maybe Ganali still has a little deterrent power at this time. Swish. I saw Garp's body suddenly rushing forward, and at the same time, a large number of jet black armament hockey directly attached to the surface of his fists. At this time, Garp directly entered the strongest fighting state of 667. Garp already has unparalleled talent on top of armament hockey's practice. The reason why Garp can get the title of Iron Fist is because his armament hockey, combined with his melee ability, can show extremely powerful destructive power. Ganali, who had just seen this scene, became even more serious. Swish. Armament hockey also appeared on the surface of Nali's body. The difference is that this time Nali did not choose to completely give up the weapon in his hand, but directly attached armament hockey to the surface of the weapon. This unique way of fighting was taught to him by Dean Riding. When a person's armament hockey is strengthened to a certain extent, it is entirely possible to strengthen the strength of the weapon through this unique method. This rusty long knife had already accompanied Ganali in many battles. Therefore, if he was not forced to, Nali would not give up this weapon that had been with him for a long time. Of course, the ultimate reason is that he is very tight now, and he simply doesn't have enough resources to purchase corresponding more powerful weapons. Otherwise, this guy would not have directly engaged in robbery. Although he will choose the corresponding target when robbing, it is enough to show that this guy is desperate. Advertisement. Swish. Xiaozh, who was holding a long knife in his hand, rushed forward immediately. The voices between the two began to collide frantically. 2 minutes later, Ganali's body fell to the ground again, and at the same time, he spurted out a large mouthful of bright red blood. Looking around, a big pothole has appeared on the battlefield at this time. This was the 12th time that Nali was thrown directly to the ground by Garp. If it weren't for Gnarly's cultivation of armament hockey to a new level, I'm afraid this guy's body would have been completely blown away by Garp. 0. And this experience only passed 2 minutes. At this time, Garp looked at Nali, who was lying on the ground in front of him in puzzlement, and said, You lifeless guy, do you really think you are my opponent? If it wasn't for Dean Riding, and they're around, I'd kill you right now. There was a fierce gleam in Garp's eyes. Garp knew very well that with Dean Riding on guard, he couldn't directly kill Nali in front of him. At this moment, Ganali's body 1.1 lying on the ground began to shake slightly. Then, he gritted his teeth forcibly, and inserted the weapon in his hand directly onto the ground. With the help of the weapon, his whole body forcibly supported himself stand up. I haven't lost yet. Ganali's eyes were full of determination, and strands of fresh blood flowed on the surface of his body. At this time, the faces of many Marines who were watching the battle flashed a look of astonishment. 218 Insufficient reserve force. This guy can still stand up. Sure enough, he is indeed the one who can be favored by Dean Riding. No matter how strong this guy is, at least his willpower is already very strong. Sure enough, the people who can join the Dimension Retrograde are a group of real monsters. Only a group of monsters can stay in one camp at the same time. This guy actually stood up again, it's really unimaginable. Even at this moment, Garp's face flashed a look of astonishment. Swish. Just when Ganali was about to rush forward again, the black shadow of Radao flashed past. Then I saw the voice of the Black Dragon Akunologia directly appearing beside Ganali, and said calmly, Yes, it seems that you are not really useless. For the time being, you have really passed the test of joining the Dimensional Retrograde. Remember the Marines in front of you, their appearance, their faces. I'll give you a year, and within a year, you must challenge them again and suppress them. Otherwise you are not worthy of being a retrograde of our dimension. At this time, Ganali nodded heavily, and then his eyes went dark, and he fell directly to the ground. The Black Dragon Akunologia didn't even set his sights on Garp and Zephyr Vice Admiral, but directly brought Nali, who was in a coma, back to the deck where Dean Riding was. Then Dean Riding completely ignored Garp and Zephyr Vice Admiral, who were not far away, and the group left the scene without hesitation. Advertisement. Seeing Dean Riding and others leave without saying a word, many princes let out a sigh of relief. Great. These monsters are finally gone. I thought we would be completely buried here today. Perhaps these monsters even think that we will not be their opponents at all. What's the name of the person who joined the dimension retrograde just now? It's Ganali. And at this time, the faces of Garp and Zephyr Vice Admiral were also very ugly. They would rather be completely defeated and die directly on the battlefield facing Dean Riding and others just now, than be ignored by Dean Riding and others so casually. Obviously, Dean Riding and the Black Dragon Akunologia and others didn't take them seriously. Damn pirates, all pirates should be caught in one go. At this time, Garp clenched his fists tightly, his face full of determination. At this time, in Garp's heart, he still hated 933 pirates. At this time, Garp was still very positive, running back and forth all day long for the many orders issued by Naval Headquarters. At this time, Zephyr Vice Admiral took a deep breath and said, "The dimensional retrogrades are already strong enough, but they are still absorbing new members. The strength of Nali just now is not worth mentioning at all, but he was promoted to the inside of the dimensional retrograde. First think our Marine may also need to make corresponding preparations. Indeed, our Marine is strong enough now, but our reserve force is very insufficient. Current status of 219 Marine." After a moment of silence, Zephyr Vice Admiral suddenly said, "Garp, do you think if I set up a Marine recruit training camp, the headquarters will agree?" Hearing Garp here, he turned around suddenly, and asked with a strange look, "Marine recruit training camp? Do you want to become a real chief instructor? I think you should get rid of this idea as soon as possible. It is absolutely impossible for the world government to allow this to happen. The world government has always been very strict with Marine. Marine's power is too huge, and above the entire sea, it has already completely become an existence that cannot be ignored at all. It is precisely because of this that the world government has extremely strict requirements on Marine in all aspects. Under such circumstances, how is it possible for the world government to hand over the Marine recruit training camp directly to the generals within the Marine to control it? World government is very eager to let many Marines recognize and accept them from the bottom of their hearts, so once Vice Admiral Ozawa put forward such an idea directly, I am afraid that the position of chief instructor of the Marine recruit training camp will definitely fall into the hands of world government officials superior." When he heard this, a gloomy look flashed across Ozawa Vice Admiral's face, and he finally lowered his head directly. He is very eager to develop the Marine recruit training camp, but he also understands that what Garp said is the truth. If the Marine recruit training camp wants to be formally established, then it is completely necessary to overcome the obstacles of the world government. Seemingly seeing the gloomy look on Ozawa Vice Admiral's face, Garp hesitated a little and then said, "Maybe we can go find Sengoku and Kong." Advertisement. Kong has now become Marine Admiral. Although Kong has not been a Marine Admiral for a long time, he holds a very important position in the hearts of the world government and many senior Marine generals. Therefore, if Kong directly stood up and represented the Marine recruit training camp, I am afraid that all problems would be completely solved. When thinking of this, a look of excitement flashed across Xiao Zhejiang's face. He suddenly realized that the solution Garp mentioned was very likely to completely solve the dilemma they were facing now. On the other side, when Ganali woke up again, she found that all parts of her body had already been completely covered by bandages. Dean Riding said calmly, "You are awake, it seems that your body is still in good condition. Ganali was seriously injured in the last battle, but in the past 3 days, this guy unexpectedly woke up again." For the three of Dean Riding, this is indeed something that they did not expect. Zhao's good. At this time, Ganali tried to get up, but found that all parts of his body were constantly making overwhelmed sounds. Then, Ganali finally fell to the ground because of his slump. Seeing this scene, Dean Riding said without hesitation, "With your current situation, it is not suitable to go to Sky Island with us, but it seems a bit inappropriate to leave you here alone. 220 special training time begins. So, we decided to take you to a new place to temporarily enhance your strength as much as possible." With Ganali's stunned expression on his face, he realized that they had already arrived at the Calm Belt area. And what they are now on is an uninhabited desert island with no zone. In the following time, the Black Dragons Akunologia and Ulquiorra Cipher personally helped Ganali improve his strength. Ganali, who has recovered more than half of his injuries, you have slowly increased your own strength through a lot of training. Of course, the two Black Dragons are more training for Ganali's existing armament hockey. He even tried his best to let Ganali master observation hockey. If there is no corresponding hockey practice experience, it is impossible to become a real strong 293. And because Nali doesn't have any devil fruit abilities, he can only rely on his strong physical fitness to fight. During the continuous fighting all day long, the Black Dragon and his party also had a clearer understanding of Ganali's background. Half a month later, Dean Riding stood with the Black Dragon, looking at Nali and Ulquiorra Cipher who were undergoing special training in the distance with complicated expressions. "I saw Ganali's body being thrown heavily on the ground by Ulquiorra Cipher, but he started to get up again and again." Advertisement. At this time, the Black Dragon said with a complicated expression, "This guy's physical recovery ability and adaptability are very strong. We all thought that it was impossible for him to persevere, even if it was 3 days of special training. I didn't expect this guy now. It's been going on for half a month. If it weren't for someone with such physical fitness like him, I am afraid that he would have completely collapsed during the special training process." Looking at the extremely crazy training content in front of him, Dean Riding Badge also showed a smile on his face, and said, "This is the reason why I recognize this guy even more. Nali, although this guy is not strong now, he will always surprise us in the future." After half a month has passed, recently, voices of hobbies have continued to sound. At this time, Ganali was running crazily on the island, and behind him was a wild wolf the size of a calf. With red eyes and drooling mouth, the wild wolf is gnarly in front of the frantic stalker. At this time, Nali kept yelling and ran forward crazily, and because the area where Nali ran was a dense forest that he was not familiar with, he often tripped over big trees. A dull voice appeared, and at this moment, Ganali fell to the ground again. At the same time, the whole body of the wild wolf was directly facing forward, and its sharp fangs were constantly approaching Ganali's body. At this time, Ganali's eyes had already been completely blindfolded. If he couldn't respond at the most critical moment, his head might be completely bitten off by wild wolves. And this is not the first time that Ganali has fallen down. I saw Ganali's body rolling to the right side very flexibly, and Shenji seemed to avoid the bite of the wild wolf behind him. 0.2212 slow comprehension speed. At the same time, Nali stood up without even the slightest hesitation, and continued to run forward frantically. At this time, Ulquiorra Cipher said in a cold voice, "Close your eyes, imagine where you are now, and try your best to perceive the surrounding environment and the position of this beast. If you can't activate observation haki today, then you might as well just die in the mouth of this wild wolf. In order not to embarrass us, dimension retrograde after going directly to see in the future." This is exactly how Ulquiorra Cipher came up with the corresponding method for the special training Sei Haki. If Ganali can't comprehend observation haki in this process, then sooner or later he will completely die in the hands of this one, the wild wolf. And at this time, the black dragon couldn't help but smile and said, "Ulquiorra Cipher, how did this guy think of such a method? He even directly found a wild wolf that had been starved for 3 days. Now Ganali may really have no way to retreat." Dean Riding couldn't help showing a smile on his face, and said, "Isn't it because Ganali is too slow to comprehend Jonwen's haki, so Ulquiorra Cipher directly made such a bad move?" In the beginning, Ulquiorra Cipher also tried to use normal methods to stimulate Gnarly's perception of observation haki. But the real observation haki needs to be activated on the edge of life and death. Observation haki is originally used to avoid various powerful attacks. Observation haki can even predict the future that will happen in a short period of time when he has cultivated to the level of his body, so as to avoid the attack that will arrive soon. Advertisement. Under such circumstances, for some reason, Ganali's comprehension of observation haki was very slow, and he couldn't compare with the two black dragons at all. Therefore, the black dragon and Ulquiorra Cipher reached an agreement without hesitation, specially found a wild wolf, starved her for 3 days, and then put it directly behind Ganali, let it go crazy to devour Ganali profit. Ganali would either activate observation haki in this special test, thereby defeating the wild wolf, or die completely in the mouth of the wild wolf. Ask for flowers. And the whereabouts of Dean Riding at this time is actually very helpless. Both Ulquiorra Cipher and Black Dragon learned observation haki after they came to this world, but because their learning speed was too fast. So they think that Ganali's comprehension speed at this time is too slow. But what they don't know is that not everyone is a true fighting genius like the two of them. In a sense, Ganali's comprehension of observation haki is actually very fast, but this speed is not worth mentioning in the eyes of the two black dragons. Hence the special training that is happening now. And now Ganali's perception of observation haki has also reached a new level, so the current black dragon, both of them are eager to let Ganali thoroughly inspire the real observation haki. Boom. The huge roaring sound began to sound continuously. Ganali kept moving forward, and fell to the ground over and over again, while the wild wolf behind him began to howl crazily. 222 heavy pressure, special training method. The wild wolf's claws had even drawn scars directly on Ganali's back. This is of course because Gnarly did not use armament haki. Under the strong request of Ulquiorra Cipher, once Ganali directly uses the observation haki to defend against the wolf's tool, it means that he will be completely eliminated by the dimensional retrograde. It is precisely because of this that Ganali's situation at this time of 000 will become very difficult. Otherwise, just relying on his perception of observation haki, it is impossible for ordinary beasts to break through the defenses on the surface of his body. That night, Ganali finally comprehended observation haki with his tenacious perseverance, and directly tore the bodies of the 10 wild wolves to pieces. Even though the wild wolf had completely lost its life when he swung his first punch, Ganali still relentlessly attacked the corpse of the wild wolf in front of him. At this time, Ganali is using this method to vent all his relaxed anger. How could the wolf threaten him if it weren't for Ulquiorra Cipher to limit his strength? The wild wolf finally pulled out more than a dozen scars on his back, and the ground in the area where he fled was completely stained red with blood. Because of this, Nali's hatred and anger towards the wolf has reached a new ultimate. At this time, Ulquiorra Cipher nodded in satisfaction, and said, "It's finally a success. It can't help you quickly comprehend observation haki. I spent a long time thinking about it." At this time, Ganali stood up slowly, and said with a strange expression, "Is this the way you have considered for a long time?" Advertisement. In a sense, this approach is not irresponsible. Of course, it also depends on who is being trained. If the objects of training were ordinary civilians, the corresponding poor people would have already been devoured by wild wolves during the special training. But Ulquiorra's cipher is still very clear about Ganali's background, so he is also very confident in Ganali. 0. The reason why Ganali didn't quickly comprehend observation haki was because he didn't really reach the corresponding edge of life and death. In fact, when Ganali was blindfolded and directly clarified the corresponding content of the training, he did not believe that Ulquiorra's cipher could do such a cruel thing to her. After all, at this time, she can already be regarded as a dimensional retrograde person. However, when the wild wolf that had been hungry for 3 days hit his back with its sharp claws for the first time, Ganali was completely awakened. He knew very well that this time, Ulquiorra's cipher was definitely playing for real. Even at the moment when he hesitated, the big mouth of the wild wolf bit his shoulder directly, and 5.3 began to tear. Ulquiorra's cipher endured severe pain and opened the wolf's big mouth. But because the location of the wild wolf could not be determined, and the movement of the wild wolf was extremely flexible, in the end they could only flee frantically forward. He didn't even know what kind of obstacles existed in the area where he was escaping in front of him. Point 223 The influence of breath is slightly better. But at this time, the howling of the wild wolf only made Nali understand that he had come to a real desperate situation. Ulquiorra's cipher also fanned the flames by his side from time to time, and claimed that even if Nali died directly in front of his eyes, he would never make a move. It was under heavy pressure that Ganali fully understood that he was now in a desperate situation, and finally broke through the pressure and directly comprehended observation haki. At this time, the training process belonging to Ganali can also temporarily come to an end. 10 Then, Dean Riding started the journey again with a group of people. Soon, everyone came directly to an unknown sea area. Bored, Dean Riding smiled and led everyone to the deck and started fishing. 4 booms are fixed above the deck, although all are looking at the sea below with great interest. Nali said excitedly, Dean Riding, you said this in advance, none of us can use observation haki. Whether we can catch fish depends entirely on our own level. This time, fishing has even become a small competition between the 4 of them. If the 3 of Dean Riding directly use observation haki or the special ability given, then Nali will undoubtedly become the last one. And at this time, Dean Riding can't compare with Black Dragon and Ulquiorra's cipher at all. Therefore, under the repeated request of Dean Riding, the entire written test was carried out entirely by their own luck. But at this time, a full hour had passed, but there was still nothing to gain from the fishhooks the 4 of them were on. Advertisement. After seeing that Dean Riding and others had also failed to gain anything, Grenoli, who was a little depressed at first, had a happy look on his face, and couldn't help but started laughing. Ha ha ha, I knew it was impossible for you to gain anything. At this time, the black dragon Akunologia's eyes suddenly lit up, and then quickly began to restrain the powerful aura inside. Seeing this, Ulquiorra's cipher also woke up suddenly, directly restraining all the powerful aura inside his body. Seeing this scene, Dean Riding couldn't help but shook his head with a smile. Although the black dragons didn't deliberately use their own strength at this time, it was because the strength in their bodies was too strong. Especially the black dragon Akunologia, who has dragon blood in his body. Just the 3 of them standing here, absolutely no fish would have enough guts to approach them. This is also the reason why the 3 of them fished for an hour, but still didn't get anything. 810. But at this time, the strength inside Ganali's body could not threaten the encountered fish in the sea at all. It's a pity, because he also stood beside the 3 of Dean Riding, so he also didn't gain anything. Then, while the 3 of Dean Riding quickly began to restrain their powerful aura, the fishing rod in the hands of the black dragon Akunologia began to shake gently. It seems that this time I have a slight advantage. As he spoke, the black dragon Akunologia gently swung the fishing rod. Crash! I saw one tail's huge blue fish churning up from the sea surface. Point 224 A mysterious island. The length of this big blue fish has directly exceeded 2 meters, and from the appearance, this big fish is just an ordinary omnivorous fish. Therefore, it is indeed very rare for ordinary omnivorous fish to grow to their current body length in the sea. At this time, Ganali didn't even want to pay attention to the fishing rod in his hand. He came directly in front of the black dragon, and swung his right fist at the big blue fish that was constantly flicking its tail. Boom! Accompanied by a dull sound, the big blue fish at this time fell directly on the deck. Seeing Dean Riding here, Jonan couldn't help but smile. Then I saw Ganali directly picked up the big blue fish with great interest, and took it directly to start making a simple cooking stove aside. Seeing this, Dean Riding couldn't help shaking his head. Dean Riding, this should be the 4 of us for dinner tonight. I'll let you guys have a good look at my real skills. Apart from combat power, my strongest skill is cooking. Gnarly's eyes were shining at the moment. For him, it is definitely a very lucky thing to be able to cook such a big fish with his own hands. At this time, Dean Riding and Hailong looked at each other, and they all saw the smile in each other's eyes. In fact, it wasn't just because Ganali's current strength was too weak that they wanted to give Nali a corresponding special training. Advertisement. The main reason is that they suddenly discovered that although Ganali had followed them and became a member of the retrograde dimension, deep down in his heart he had never had much sense of belonging to this identity. This may be because Nali did not directly meet the large army of dimension retrogrades, but the most important reason is because Nali is very clear about the strength of Dean Switzerland and others. And when his strength is compared with Dean Riding and others, there is no comparison at all. Because of this, Ganali has a corresponding inferiority complex in his heart. Therefore, after discussions between Dean Riding and Black Dragon, they directly formulated a simple training plan. And just because at this time Ganali has completely fallen into a coma, and this plan can be proposed logically, and there is no need to consider Ganali's thoughts at all. In this way, after a brief training, Ganali's strength has finally grown by leaps and bounds. At this time, Nali had already cooked the grilled fish thoroughly, and after dividing it into 4 equal parts, the 4 of Dean Riding began to feast on it. Soon, the 4 of Dean Riding came directly to the position near the direction of West Blue in Wuffin's belt. At this time, a huge island suddenly appeared not far in front of them. At this time, the black dragon Akunologia, Chiandas, suddenly frowned, and said, I don't remember the existence of such an island being recorded on the map we obtained. What's the matter with this island? It stands to reason that with the scale of this encounter, he couldn't have been unknown to this older kid. In order to ensure that their trip to the East Blue can be fruitful, the black dragon Akunologia carried a very accurate nautical chart alone when he left. 225 Special Intuition. This nautical chart was also obtained from some big pirates. Hearing this, Ganali subconsciously said, could it be because the map you're carrying is wrong? After all, there are too many maps on this sea. It's normal for some guys to have corresponding things when they reproduced the map. Hearing this, the black dragon Akunologia shook his head slightly, and said, this is impossible, we obtained this map from some special channels. And this map was even one of their rare 917 collections at the time, and they had absolutely no guts to deceive us. And the authenticity of this map has been confirmed during our voyage. Just when Nali was still about to express his doubts, Dean Riding patted him on the shoulder with a smile, and said, as you said, there are indeed a lot of maps on the sea. But no matter who it is, it will be true when it comes to replicating the map. Because if the map is wrong, it is very likely that the corresponding navigator who sails according to the map Bobby will make a wrong judgment. In this way, the entire pirate group may die completely in the storm. Therefore, the authenticity of any nautical chart that can flow on the sea can be tested, and no matter how black-hearted a businessman is, it is absolutely impossible to easily create a fake nautical chart. Because it is normal for many pirate groups to attack and kill each other, the treasure maps collected by both parties may often be exchanged frequently. If once the same treasure map is directly spread among the pirates and kills many pirates, then many pirates will definitely come to the door directly. Advertisement. The unscrupulous merchants who sold fake nautical charts have long been completely dead. Hearing this, Ganali nodded with a vague understanding. At this time, Ganali didn't really go to sea at all, so he didn't understand the corresponding role of a real nautical chart on the sea. And at this time, the black dragon Akunologia quietly closed his eyes, and observation hockey and his perception crazily covered the island in front of him. After a while, the black dragon Akunologia frowned and said, I always feel that something is wrong with this small island. Ulquiorra Cipher on the side also nodded and said, I also have this intuition. Hearing Dean Riding here, there was a look of interest on his face, and he said, in this case, let's go up and take a look. Swish. Then, the boat on which the 4 people were riding flew towards the coastline in front of them at a fast speed. Soon, Dean Riding took the other 3 people directly to the island. The area of the island seems to be very vast, but there seems to be no sign of any living people on the island. A large number of dense forests and towering peaks are interspersed among them, and the overall momentum looks like a real primitive jungle. At this time, Dean Riding said with great interest, it seems that there should be something hidden inside. Otherwise, how could most islands have no traces of human beings setting foot in it? 226 A quiet place. Even though this area belongs to the Calm Belt area, because of the existence of many sea kings below the surface of the Calm Belt, pirates with ordinary strength dare not come here at all. But no matter what, the number of strong men above the sea will always emerge in endlessly. Therefore, if there are really some secrets hidden inside this island, the coordinates of this island may have already been spread around the world. But Dean Riding and others have never heard of Calm Belt, and such a small island still exists. Therefore, everyone is keenly aware that there seems to be a corresponding deviation and a corresponding secret buried in this matter. Come on, let's go in and take a look. Following Dean Riding's order, the black dragon Akunologia walked directly at the front of the team. Dean Riding and Nali are in the middle of the line and Ulquiorra Cipher is at the end of the line. The body strength of the black dragon Akunologia is extremely terrifying, and he can directly transform into the body of a black dragon at the most critical moment. Therefore, if there is really a very special unexpected situation hidden in the dense forest, the black dragon can also directly block the sudden attack with its strong body. And Ulquiorra Cipher, who is at the back of the team, can forcibly block powerful attacks from behind by virtue of his returning status. Dean Riding, as the absolute foundation of the existence of dimension retrogrades and others, naturally needs to be in an absolute safe zone. As for Nali, it was because his personal strength was too weak, so he also stayed by Dean Riding's side. Accompanied by a group of people who continued to move forward. At this time, Nali suddenly said, Dean Riding, along the way, I don't seem to have heard any birds chirping. It stands to reason that in such a dense forest, it is impossible for the roars of birds and various small beasts to disappear. Advertisement. However, at this time, the species was advancing all the way, but the surrounding environment was always in a state of absolute tranquility. Dean Riding nodded indifferently. At this time, the black dragon Akunologia and Ulquiorra Cipher had already maintained absolute vigilance. Ho, ho, zero seeking flowers. At this moment, low-pitched roars suddenly sounded from the 4 directions where Dean Riding and the others were located. Just when Dean Riding took a closer look, he saw a group of wild wolves rushing out of the dense forest. The length of each wild wolf's body directly exceeded 2 meters, and Zhengli's fangs shone brightly under the sunlight. 0. And the eyes of each wild wolf were shining with green light, as if these wild wolves had been hungry for a long time. Some wild wolves are even staring at the bodies of Dean Riding and others, dripping body fluid constantly. Obviously, this group of wild wolves has thoroughly regarded them as today's dinner. Seeing this, the black dragon Akunologia's expression turned slightly cold. At the same time, a unique dragon vein power began to resemble and spread around. The bodies of the many wild wolves that were surrounding everyone suddenly became extremely stiff, and then they couldn't stop whimpering accordingly. The next moment, I saw wild wolves quickly clamping their tails, then turned around without hesitation, and fled away into the distance. 227 Strange Jungle Forest. Some wild wolves were even tripped directly on the ground because their fleeing movements were too hasty. Soon, these wild wolves completely disappeared from the sight of Dean Riding and others. A large amount of smoke appeared in this field. At this time, Dean Riding just shook his head indifferently, and then said, "Let's go, move on, they are just some insignificant beasts that don't have the rationality of 143. Then, under the leadership of Dean Riding, the crowd continued to start the prospect. Perhaps just now, the aura emanating from the upgraded surface of the Black Dragon Akunologia played a role. Along the way, they were not harassed by regional beasts. Then, Dean Riding and his group came to the first half of the jungle again. Soon, one after another subtle voices began to sound continuously. Swish swish, I saw one long green snake after another continuously falling from midair. When everyone looked up, they could see many long snakes crawling above the dense forest, and all of these long snakes were green. Perhaps it is precisely because of their experience that these long snakes have been affected. Therefore, a large number of snakes began to fall to the ground crazily. Seeing this situation again and again, Ganali and the others could only keep avoiding. Ulquiorra Cipher frowned slightly, then pouted, and said, "It's really a special place." Swish swish. Then, a mass of white and black light immediately appeared on the surface of Ulquiorra Cipher's body. Advertisement. This group of white and black Reiatsu directly spread towards the surroundings. Then, under Ganali's stunned gaze, the white and black Reiatsu directly formed a protective shield, covering all of them. Ulquiorra Cipher let out a slight breath, and said, "Now we can continue to move forward smoothly." Soon, everyone continued to move forward, and the ring finally stopped in front of the same arrogant tree. The diameter of this big tree has directly exceeded 20 meters. When he saw this, even Dean Riding had a horrified look on his face, and couldn't help but ask, how long has this big tree survived? Could it be that this small island is the same as this uncle? Is it very old? At this time, the eyes of the black dragon Akunologia couldn't help showing excitement, and he said directly, "It seems that we are going to make a big discovery this time. 0 inches. The longer this island exists, the more secrets it hides. After all, without anyone setting foot, the things preserved in this small island must be very complete." Then, a group of people began to climb up around the big tree. Eventually a huge hole appeared in front of them. Dean Riding nodded slightly, and said, "Go ahead and try it." The Black Dragon Akunologia directly took the lead, leading a group of people to climb directly into 3.5. When they entered the big tree with a diameter of 20 meters, they saw a new world. I saw a spiral staircase inside the big tree at this time. This spiral staircase led them directly to the depths of the ground. When he saw this, everyone including Dean Riding had expressions of surprise on their faces. 228 Isolated Perception. At this time, Ganali couldn't help but jumped up, and said, "Could it be that this is the way others hide and offend? Next, I am afraid that as long as we reach the depths of the ground, we will be able to understand the real answer to this mystery." At this time, Dean Riding and Observation Hockey of the Black Dragon Trio had already started to explore frantically around the stairs. If it weren't for the fact that this big tree directly prevented them from exploring at the beginning, they actually didn't need to enter the inside of this sturdy Big Ten tree at all. When walking outside just now, the three of Dean Riding had already discovered the corresponding hole on the surface of the big tree's body. Since their observation hockey can't go deep into the inside of this big tree, then they can only continue to explore the inside. What Dean Riding was curious about was why the outer layer of this big tree could directly isolate observation hockey from exploring. You must know that the three black dragons including Dean Riding have already cultivated observation hockey to an extremely deep level. It stands to reason that it is impossible for this level of attack to affect them. However, at this time, all this appeared in front of them alive. Even the black dragon at this time showed a look of expectation on his face, and said, "Let's go, let's see what is hidden below." Then, the black dragon Akunologia took the lead and led the crowd directly to the stairs and walked down the ground. When the ladder completely came to the end, everyone jumped down. What was seen was a corresponding hill made entirely of jewels and gold. Advertisement. At this time, Ganali uttered a strange cry and jumped directly into the ocean of jewels, his eyes shining brightly. On the other side, the three of Dean Riding were constantly looking at the open space around them. The black dragon Akunologia said, "Based on the size of the open space we see now, the entire underground of the island should be completely empty. Who the hell built such a huge underground space here?" Under the constant shadow of observation hockey, the three of Dean Riding also thoroughly understood that this small island had already been hollowed out long ago. And some corresponding vegetation on the surface of the island is nothing more than a deceptive thing. At this time, a smile appeared on Dean Riding's face, and he said directly, the observation haki of the two of you didn't notice the internal problems of the island at all. Hearing the black dragon here, the two nodded slightly. We came to the small island, and we have already tried 530 to use observation haki to try to pass below the ground, but we didn't find any difference. In our perception, the entire ground seems to be completely thick, and there is nothing unusual about it. So how on earth did the people who made this place do all of this? Dean Riding nodded with a smile, and then said, let's split up. Then Dean Riding, the Black Dragon Akunologia, and Ulquiorra cipher vibrated throughout the underground space, constantly shuttling. Soon, they took a look at the ground space below the entire island. 229A design that kills itself. In the end, everyone directly came to an astonishing conclusion, that is, the entire island has basically 1/3 of its area, and it has been completely dug into an underground cavity. At the beginning, the entire island they predicted had been hollowed out, which was nothing more than an exaggerated rhetoric. After actual exploration, it was found that 1/3 of the island's ground had completely turned into a void, which was already a very amazing thing. Even the Black Dragon Akunologia frowned directly at this time, and said, what's going on with all this? Who made all this? Archeola Cipher said directly, the most important thing is that I didn't find any exit other than this big tree. Could it be that this is the only exit in the entire underground space that is directly open to the outside? Such a thing should be impossible. Dean Riding nodded directly. If this space is completely used to build a hidden treasure house, then it is absolutely impossible for the designer to only involve one exit. Because once he enters the interior himself, once he is noticed by the outside world, he can directly seal this entrance. In this way, he can only be trapped alive inside. If this kind of thing really happened, it can only show that the designer has been looking for a dead end. The cunning rabbit and the 3 caves, the designer can't be so stupid. At this time, Dean Riding took a deep breath and said, I always feel like we've overlooked something. If the person involved is just looking for his own death, he doesn't need to go through such a lot of trouble. Advertisement. And the disappearance of the corresponding soil blocks under these small islands is too abrupt, but no matter what, this is definitely a very large project. So I don't believe that the people behind the scenes just wanted to build a huge grave for themselves. There is no impenetrable wall in the world, and it is impossible to be completely satisfied with the news here. If it is said that he designed himself to go into the depths of the ground, and then the only exit was directly blocked by outsiders from the outside world, then the designer designed a huge tomb for himself. At this moment, a shout suddenly sounded from the side. Come and see me, I found something different. As Nali's shouting sounded, Dean Riding and others immediately came to Nali's side. Then I saw several huge boxes in the direction Nali pointed his finger at. Then, Ganali directly opened the box without hesitation. What you see is a pile of devil fruit that has been piled up. Then, all 4 of them, including the Black Dragon Akunologia, showed expressions of shock. Ganali couldn't help but start screaming. Devil fruit, how come there are so many devil fruits, of Li Zhao's, what's going on here? Such precious devil fruits, would they be piled up here in batches? Who on earth has such a great ability to collect them all? If every devil fruit reaches the auction, the IQ will be directly auctioned for a sky-high price. Not to mention, so many devil fruits, all gathered together, it is definitely a real astronomical treasure. 230 The human body is the most important foundation. So in the entire underground layer, the most precious thing is not the jewels and gold piled up like hills, but the devil fruit that these 2 boxes are stacked together. A faint smile appeared on Dean Riding's face, and he said, Nali, there are so many devil fruits here anyway, you can just pick one and eat it. Upon hearing this, a look of surprise flashed across Ganali's face. If he wants to become a strong person really fast, then devouring devil fruit in front of him is the fastest way. Even the most ordinary person, after devouring devil fruit, his own physique can change rapidly. Under such circumstances, what is placed before Ganali is definitely a way to reach the heavens. And according to the pattern and shape of the 710 devil fruit in the box, even Logia's devil fruit appeared directly inside the box. At this moment, Ganali kept swallowing his saliva, and finally shook his head with a firm expression, and said directly, let's forget it. A person can only repeat devil fruit once in a lifetime. Without the devil fruit illustrated book, I don't want to eat an animal fruit without any knowledge. Although each devil fruit is very precious, the effects of each devil fruit are completely different. Therefore, swallowing him directly without clearing the corresponding effect of devil fruit is tantamount to drawing a lottery. Advertisement. And this matter directly affects the corresponding lottery draw in the second half of his life. In this way, I have become a member of Dimensional Retrograde, so I believe that I will become as strong as you in a short time, so I don't need to bet in this way at all. If I lose the bet, the corresponding ability of devil fruit will directly limit my growth limit. When they heard this, several people including Dean Riding nodded slightly, with a look of satisfaction on their faces. When inside the Dimension Retrograde, the corresponding effect of the so-called devil fruit is actually not that important anymore. Although in the last battle in the Holy Land of Mariajoy, everyone thought that all the Dimension Retrogrades used the power of devil fruit. But what they don't know is that Ulquiorra Cipher and others have completely used the power of another world. It's just that these powerful forces were narrowly regarded by the people watching the live broadcast as nothing more than a battle between demon fruit powers. At this time, the Black Dragon Akunologia had a gratified look on his face, and then said, I have trained you for so long, after returning to our base camp, as long as you follow my plan, completely go on. Then the ordinary demon fruit power that you will become stronger can't compare to you at all. In my knowledge, the most critical strength and foundation of human beings is their own body. And once a person's body is directly transformed with obvious defects, even if he can become stronger in this way, there is a huge limit to the ceiling of a person's future combat power. Point 2312 Sean Yaya's special role. In fact, after the Black Dragon Akunologia and others came to this world, they completely looked down on the so-called Devil Fruit's ability. Because Hailong and others firmly believe that the power of demons cannot be given to ordinary humans out of thin air. Moreover, the Black Dragon Akunologia and others have long been accustomed to gaining more powerful power through their own cultivation. After Dean Riding and his team finally recorded the location of the island, they went directly to the outer direction. Nali, who saw this scene, was a little puzzled and said, Dean Riding, if we leave all these treasures here, maybe someone else will get there first. Nali couldn't understand at all that in the face of so many interviews with Dean Riding, they didn't want to move him away directly, but kept him here. Hearing this, Dean Riding, Hailong and the others looked at each other, seeing the smiles in each other's eyes at a glance. Dean Riding said with a smile, first of all, there are too many things here, and it is impossible for us to completely empty them all at once. Secondly, because this place is already close to the edge of Calm Belt, the Dimension Retrograde will arrive here soon. After they arrive here, they can evacuate everything here. Of course, I'm not talking about the big troops, but Tushan Yaya. And Tushan Yaya's speed is beyond your imagination. When he heard this, a look of ultimate astonishment flashed across Ganali's face. He simply couldn't understand the powerful power that Tushan Yaya's various spells could bring and the effects they could exert under special circumstances. Advertisement. The ancestor of Tushan Yaya's special spell can take away many treasures here without leaving any traces. If the three of them kept moving, it would be difficult to evacuate the place without anyone noticing without special storage items. If they are moving here, it's good that you make too much noise, who knows what kind of existence will attract the attention. Although the dimension retrogrades are not afraid of anyone above the sea, if the number of ants continues to increase, it will also be a great trouble for the dimension retrogrades. Zero looking for flowers. When he heard this, Ganali finally nodded in a daze, and walked towards the outside together with everyone. Not long after, I saw Genali holding a tattered giant sword that belonged to him in his hand, his eyes were like lightning, and he was constantly searching in the dense forest. Zero. In the end, I saw an extremely huge beast walking slowly through it. Seeing this scene at this time, Ganali's eyes lighted up instantly, and then he fell from the sky at a fast speed. The giant sword in Gnarly's hand was swung violently. Swish. A bright white light flashed past, and the head of this wild beast was completely shattered in an instant, turning into a pile of mud, which was directly sprinkled on the ground. But at this time, talents such as Black Dragon and Dean Riding walked out from the corner on the other side. A look of satisfaction appeared on the Black Dragon's face, and he said, yes, it seems that you have used armament hockey to a new combat domain 9. 232 special application of hockey. And at this time, a look of excitement flashed across Ganali's face. Dean Riding and Ulquiorra Cypher on the side were quite satisfied seeing this scene. In the process of facing this beast's attack just now, Ganali directly used armament hockey in his sword move. It was also through this method that Ganali was able to completely damage the head of this beast in an instant, 873. Otherwise, if a normal sword move is used, a fracture will appear in the head of this beast, but it will not be completely turned into a lot of powder and rotten meat. Armament hockey, in addition to possessing corresponding defensive power, the most important function is that it will explode extremely powerful impact force under violent impact. And the head of the beast in front of him was completely the corresponding result of armament hockey's impact. Ha ha ha, is this armament hockey? It really is extraordinary. At this time, Ganali could clearly feel that he seemed to have completely understood armament hockey. And the total time from the time he learned armament hockey to today is only half a month. For Ganali, this is simply another thing that makes him extremely excited. And Dean Riding is also very satisfied with the speed at which Nali learned armament hockey. You know, even in the original book, Luffy, the real son of Luck, spent a full month learning armament hockey and observation hockey. Advertisement. Of course, Conqueror's hockey is another corresponding behavior related to talent, and the learning time of Conqueror's hockey is completely negligible. Then, Ganali directly picked up the remaining body of the beast with a face full of excitement, and came directly to an open space with everyone. Nali directly used the giant sword in his hand to start slicing, and used the color observation hockey to accurately depress the bodies of the 10 beasts into slices of uniformly thick and uniform roast meat. Under such circumstances, Ulquiorra Cypher personally came onto the stage and directly coated various raw materials needed for barbecue, and the place was immediately filled with a strong aroma. While enjoying the barbecue, some people were thinking about the scenes they had just seen. Even Ulquiorra Cypher at this time couldn't help but say, the strength of the creatures contained in this small island is still relatively high. In an ordinary deserted island, even if there is a dense forest, it is impossible to reach this level. 0 inches. The length of the beast that Ganali killed just now directly exceeded 10 meters. But in the ordinary dense forest, how could there be such a level of beasts? However, Dean Riding, who heard here, said thoughtfully, maybe it's because the people behind the scenes want to build an absolute line of defense here. So he specially placed these beasts in this dense forest. And it is precisely because of the existence of these beasts that no one can go through the dense forest to the location of any big tree. Even if a person with a strength of 1.7 is really strong, if he can't find the location of that uncle with observation haki, he will naturally be unable to find all the treasures inside. Hearing this, Hailong also showed a thoughtful expression on his face, and said, "That's right, even the three of us were almost deceived by this big tree, let alone the ear it's time to enter." 233 The mysterious victim. Hailong and the others are very confident in their own strength. On this sea, they are worthy of anyone. And it has been a long time since the end of the last war. At this time, their strength has also been further improved. If it is this time, if they start the war again in the Holy Land Mariajoy, what will happen? It is really unknown. Ganali on the side subconsciously said, 10 inches if the situation here is really chosen by the person behind the scenes to protect the meeting of these treasures, the special place, then who is this person? Quote. Dean Riding said with a smile, the scale of those treasures just now is too huge. According to the normal situation, this person is above the sea. 10 walking is a good position. And ordinary pirates or eyesight can't treasure so many treasures and devil fruit. The accumulation of these treasures is already a very terrifying number, not to mention the direct addition of the number of many devil fruits, it is an extremely terrifying existence. Under such circumstances, ordinary people simply cannot accumulate so many treasures. This can only prove that the real caring people built the crafting island and left these treasures here. The Black Dragon Akunologia on the side said thoughtfully, then, at least the builder is not suitable for storing such a large amount of treasures by her side, and it is absolutely impossible that his treasures are just for many years. It has been accumulated since then, and it is another thing for the elderly. If these treasures are really just for collection, then there is no need for the builder to put them on such a huge deserted island. Advertisement. What's more, ordinary people simply cannot get such a huge amount of devil fruit. This can only prove that the people behind the scenes are at least gathered in the sea circle, and his status is extraordinary, and he can get in touch with many treasures. When thinking of this, a thoughtful look appeared on the faces of all the people, and people began to live in their minds one by one. It is impossible for such people to gather nameless above the sea, perhaps they have never seen or heard his name. But at this time, Ganali suddenly laughed, and said, ha ha ha, no matter what, at least these treasures will all fall into the hands of our dimension retrograde. And if the person behind the scenes knows all this, I'm afraid he will be so angry that he vomits blood. Dean Riding and the others looked at each other and couldn't help laughing. Originally they thought that the temporary inability to reach Sky Island would slow down their search for resources. But with this batch of huge resources, all of this is no longer a problem. And the most important thing is that the emergence of this batch of newly found devil fruit can play a great positive role in the development of the dimension retrograde. Dimensional retrograde has begun to recruit corresponding members in large quantities. When the number of these members continues to increase, a devil fruit suddenly appears, which can also greatly increase their loyalty to the dimensional retrograde and enhance their strength. 234 Reasons why dimensional retrogrades become stronger. After all, devil fruit's rarity and high price are not ordinary pirates at all, as can be imagined. Even many pirates who have been famous for a long time rely on their own swordsmanship, physical fitness and even excellent weapons and equipment to fight. Those who have special massage fruits are destined to be a minority. However, naval headquarters on the other side, Martial Marine has received the corresponding news immediately. At this time, Sengoku's complexion also became very ugly. This time, when facing the crowd of dimension retrogrades, Garp and Ozawa couldn't even make a shot easily. These guys have become stronger than before. Sengoku's words immediately made the complexions of many marine generals present very ugly. Because they are very aware of the courage of Garp and Ozawa on the battlefield. Garp and Ozawa flinched directly when facing the dimensional rebels' kindness, but no one doubted their determination to fight for Marine. The merits of the two of them are too huge, so no one doubts whether they dare to make a move in the face of extreme pressure. However, even the Garp duo simply backed down under the circumstances. This is because they are under too much pressure on the spot. Advertisement. At this moment, Kong took a deep breath and said, things are getting worse and worse now, and in less than 3 months, the guy from the dimension retrograde has become stronger. And if you count them in detail, the time they appeared on this sea is definitely very short. Indeed, Dean Riding has been dormant on the island for more than a year, but we have never heard of where the Black Dragon Akunologia and other members were active before. These guys seem to have appeared very abruptly beside Dean Riding, so according to our corresponding deduction, the strength of these guys has improved by leaps and bounds in a short period of time. When hearing this, another Marine Admiral said in surprise, do you think there is a possibility? The reason why Dean Riding can become the head of the Dimension Retrograde with his not very strong strength is because everyone the strengthening is all because of his Devil Fruit ability. Soon, there was silence in the entire conference room. There was a look of disbelief on everyone's faces. They found that this possibility may be true. Although all of this sounds like a fantasy, it is impossible for a real strong man to be above the sea and remain unknown from the beginning to the end. Powerhouses like the Black Dragon Akunologia and Ulquiorra Cipher, etc., they should have already made a strong reputation in the early days of their cultivation. It finally reached the huge combat power it is now. But the Marine and the world government have already investigated these guys in private, and have not found any corresponding traces of their activities in any area. This can only prove that the strength of these powerhouses has suddenly been greatly enhanced in a short period of time, and this possibility can only be placed in the direction of Devil Fruit. 235 The Lost Locks Pirates. Coupled with the fact that Dean Riding directly became the boss of the dimensional retrograde with a weaker strength than the members at this time, this is why many Marines recognized this possibility very much at the first time. In fact, the possibility they guessed is basically close to the fact, but the two will never be able to merge. Then one of the 5 elders members said directly, the most important thing is that the person in charge of monitoring the Locks pirates has received the latest information. The Locks pirates have completely disappeared. Where are they now? What did they do in 640 recently? We have no way of knowing. Upon hearing this, the faces of the 5 elders adults at the scene immediately showed a look of strong astonishment. Did they suddenly disappear at this time? The most important thing for celestial dragons is coming soon. The Locks pirates just disappeared at this time. What the hell are they thinking? Do they want to completely destroy the thing? No matter what, there was a strong look of vigilance on the faces of everyone. For them, the most important thing for the upcoming Beck Dragon people must not be destroyed. In order to ensure that this matter can go on smoothly, they have been monitoring the most unstable factor of the Locks pirates. However, just when they thought that the Locks pirates would not intervene in this matter at all, the entire pirates suddenly disappeared. This is definitely a very difficult thing to accept for people in the world government. And on the other side, the naval headquarters base. Advertisement. Marshal Marine received a call from the world government. Has the Locks pirates disappeared completely? My lord, do you mean that they are probably preparing to destroy the celestial dragons? At this time, a silent voice came from the other end of the phone. We have no way of knowing this, but we have to imagine the possibility of this worst-case scenario. Therefore, we must now use the fastest speed to find all the members of the Locks pirates, and then stop their plans as much as possible. Upon hearing this, Marshal Marine finally agreed and hung up the phone. You know, for the current Marine, they simply don't have the strength to confront the Locks pirates head-on. The Locks pirates are known as the strongest pirates above the sea, and they have more than just a false name. Many crew members in the Locks pirates all have combat effectiveness at the admiral level or above. Under such circumstances, the Locks pirates, many ordinary pirates under its banner, are also very crazy. Of course, the most important reason is that the Locks pirates have been carrying out an extensive training policy. All those who join the Locks pirates can become a qualified member only if they survive one battle after another. It is also because of this that everyone in the Locks pirates is fearless, they are eager to fight, they hope to obtain the resources of the Emperor and the opportunity to be promoted in the Locks pirates in the battle. The Locks pirates are a miniature version of the sea. 236 The huge shadow under the sea. Everyone in it is climbing up by their own strength, and there is no such thing as a situation where they are in a high position because of nepotism or other reasons. The encounters that exist in the world government, nepotism and favors, the door-stealing high-level things in Locks, it is impossible for the pirate group to appear. After a little thought, Marshal Marine issued a new order. For him, since the world government has completely intervened in this matter, it is naturally impossible for them, Marine, to stand idly by. Soon, a Marine admiral and many Marine finalists marched in the direction of New World. Their goal this time is to find the corresponding traces of the Locks pirates. On the other side, on the mysterious island of Calm Belt, Dean Riding also waited for Tu Shanyaya to come. Tu Shanyaya directly used her spells to loot all the treasures, and then, everyone quickly left together. Except for Tu Shan and Yaya who used their special magic ability to fly directly to the wine capital, Dean Riding and his group slowly started to go to sea again. On the sea, during the sailing process, because there is no particularity, Nali can only row the boat and take everyone away together, acting as a temporary power. And Ganali seems to have accepted this hard work a long time ago. After all, in the current small team, his strength is the most crystal. What's more, in the small team, except for Dean Riding, the boss of the Dimension Retrograde, both the Black Dragon and Ulquiorra Cipher are all people who have taught him. Although they will all be official members of Dimensional Retrograde in the future, this does not mean that he can be compared with Black Dragon and others. The gap between him and Hailong and the others is a corresponding thing that has been completely fixed since Zhangjiao. Advertisement. And even though Ganali is very confident in the improvement of his own strength, he is also very confident that he can break out of the world above the sea. But no matter what, Ganali doesn't think that his strength can be directly compared with the Black Dragon Akunologia and Ulquiorra Cipher. The two are not on the same level at all. 0 for flowers. 0. Boom. A dull sound suddenly exploded from below the sea surface. Nali, who was rowing, immediately looked forward and saw the huge black shadow below the sea. Dean Riding, look, is that Sea Kings? Completely different from Nali who was very excited, Dean Riding and the Black Dragon had already predicted the arrival of the Sea Kings in advance, so there was no surprise at all about all of this. Under the effect of observation hockey, when this Sea Kings was trying to approach them, they had already learned the corresponding information of Sea Kings. The gigantic Sea Kings broke through a kilometer directly in size. Monsters of this level are not at all Ganali in front of them, and they can compete with them. But Grenali, who saw this scene, was full of excitement on his face. It's been a long time since I came to Calm Belt, and I finally met the real Sea Kings. Is this the Sea Kings? The body of Sea Kings is really so huge, such a monster should not have any opponents below the sea surface, right? 237 Let's feel it. Except for some pirates with special abilities, otherwise, there are generally no pirates who can easily enter the sea. Except for the special race of the Murlocs, as long as any race sets foot below the surface of the sea, its combat effectiveness will be weakened to varying degrees. Except for some powerful people, when many people encounter sea kings below the sea surface, they are basically close to death. Of course, 780. Perhaps because the sea king's bodies are too large, so Poseidons are generally in a state of deep sleep, except when eating, they rarely leave the sea area they are currently in directly. After all, the place where sea kings live has completely become a forbidden place for the death of many marine life. Therefore, under such circumstances, if Poseidon wants to have a real meal and accumulate a lot of fat for them to sleep, they must travel through a longer cape to obtain food. At this moment, the black dragon Akunologia said directly, Ganali, go and try it, and feel the physical strength of the sea kings. After all, you have already been involved in the routine of the sea. Sooner or later, you will face the real sea kings alone. It is better to try as much as possible at this time, with our guarantee. Ulquiorra Cipher on the side smiled directly and said, that's right, Ganali, the feeling of fighting the sea kings will definitely be something you will never forget. Ganali, who heard this, did not hesitate at all, gritted his teeth fiercely, and directly pulled out a rusty long knife. The lacquered black armament hockey covered it, and there were some rusts on it. Madara's long knife quickly became clear and translucent, shining bright black light under the sunlight. Advertisement. Then I'll try it. I must use the long knife in my hand to leave 18 holes in his head. As he said that, Nali tightly held the long knife in his hand, and kept looking at the huge black shadow approaching him. Judging from the size of the shadow in front of him, the sea kings below the sea obviously wanted to completely swallow up the small boat in front of him. Now that the Black Dragon has proposed a corresponding method to let Ganali learn more, it is naturally impossible for a Poseidon to get his wish. The Black Dragon just waved its hand lightly, and with wisps of black breath, it directly attached to the surroundings of the boat. The black breath directly interacted with the sea surface, suddenly forming a silent shock wave, and the whole boat retreated backward like a sharp arrow. At the same time, Ganali spotted the figure and jumped down without hesitation. At this time, Ganali himself does not have the devil fruit ability, so he will not be afraid of the influence of seawater on him. What's more, everyone has already tempered Ganali's corresponding ability to fight below the sea surface in the special process some time ago. Moreover, Enrui 5.8 Ding and his party were still watching Ganali's battle situation from the sidelines. Naturally, they would not have watched Ganali being completely killed by the sea kings below the surface of the sea. A half smile appeared on Dean Riding's face, and then he said, how long do you think Nali can last under the sea surface? The gap in strength between him and the sea kings is too great. 238 Edge of Death. After a little hesitation, the Black Dragon Akunologia said, I don't think it's a problem to persist. I just can't be sure whether he can directly hurt sea kings. You must know that sea kings not only have a huge body, but their own defense layer is also very terrifying. Under such circumstances, the protective layer on the sea king's exterior, that is, the layer of flesh, is not something that Ganali at this stage can easily break through. Ulquiorra Cipher on the side also nodded slightly, and said, I just hope that Ganali won't give up too early when he is facing such a desperate situation, otherwise, his future is destined not to be too difficult. Flat. After this period of special training, Ulquiorra Cipher and Hailong have already fully determined that Nali in front of him is definitely a person with extremely ordinary talent. And after learning about the two of them's evaluation of Ganali at that time, Enrui rolled his eyes without hesitation. You know, whether it is the Black Dragon Akunology or Ulquiorra Cipher, they are all the best in their respective worlds, and they can even be called the Sons of Luck. And Gnarly is just a potential of this world, and he can be regarded as a good ordinary pirate. Even so, Ganali is simply unable to compare with the two Black Dragons. You know, even if Ganali's strength really reaches its peak in the original book, he can only be called a big pirate just above the sea, and it is simply incomparable with the strength of Black Dragon and others sweeping the entire world. Read on. Let time tell. On the other side of the battlefield, it was seen that Ganali had completely jumped below the surface of the sea at this time. After seeing the boat completely disappear, the huge shadow put all its anger on Ganali. Advertisement. Whoosh. I saw a huge figure moving towards Ganali at a fast speed, and this body completely opened its ferocious mouth in an instant. Seeing this, Ganali's expression suddenly changed. He suddenly found that judging by his moving speed below the sea surface, it was difficult to avoid the sudden attack of this sea kings. Is Lousy going to be this guy's shit like this? Thinking of this, Ganali gritted his teeth fiercely. Instead of retreating, he rushed straight forward. Ganali knew very well that it was absolutely impossible for him to be killed by this sea kings in this battle. Dean Riding and others are all on the sidelines for care. And he didn't want to completely lose the opportunity to continue fighting with the sea kings. Ganali knew very well deep in his heart that in this short period of time, 750's personal combat power had already increased several times compared to before. Therefore, Ganali knew very well that if he missed this opportunity, it would be impossible for him to usher in a second leap of luck. Although Dean Riding, Black Dragon and others have been emphasizing that they came here just to get one thing done. And through the previous relationship, Ganali can also see that Dean Riding and others came here just for Kozaburo. And now that the main purpose has been achieved, Dean Riding and others can completely leave this sea area as quickly as possible. 239 A guy worth looking forward to. But they stop and go along the way, and even stop at multiple islands. Ganali is very clear that they definitely did not do this because they have a lot of time. On the contrary, the situation of dimension retrogrades being targeted on the sea has become more and more severe since this period of time. After all, Both the world government and the marine want to regain the face of the last holy land, the Battle of Mariajoy, with the retrograde dimension. Sonali understood very well that Dean Riding and others did this just to allow him to grow up so quickly during this period. During this period of time, whether it is Dean Riding or Black Dragon, both of them will not be stingy with their perception of combat, often find the right opportunity to give him advice. Although it is said that the current Nali has no idea why Dean Riding and others are so interested in him, why they are so kind to a little pirate like her. But Ganali understands that this period of time is probably one of the greatest fortunes in his life, and he must firmly seize this opportunity to make himself stronger. Whether it was the life and death struggle with wild wolves in the dense forest, or the disparity in strength with this Sea Kings, Ganali didn't want to back down. Because he didn't know if he would have the chance to come back again after he stepped back. On the surface of the sea, the three of De Enrui had already completely locked onto the scene of Ganali's battle with the sword door color. Once Ganali's life is threatened accordingly, they can launch an attack immediately and successfully rescue Ganali. Advertisement. At the same time, the eyes of the three were full of anticipation. They very much hope to see what kind of quality Ganali will show when facing an enemy that is absolutely impossible to defeat. You must know that even those who are dimensional retrogrades, in the process of growing up, they also defeated many enemies that were impossible to defeat, and finally reached this step today. Therefore, Dean Riding and others are very clear that only with the courage to draw a knife to anyone can they continue to move forward. A deep look appeared in Dean Riding's eyes, and he thought to himself, Nali, don't let me down. You must know that it was Dean Riding's full push to let Ganali join the dimension retrograde. If Ganali did not show a satisfactory attitude to everyone, I am afraid that this incident will be deeply imprinted in the hearts of the dimension retrograde. Although under the influence of the system, the people of the dimensional retrograde will maintain 100% loyalty to Dean Riding. But this kind of loyalty is also rushing to the corresponding level of attitude. After getting along for a long time, Dean Riding already knew that after the Black Dragon and others came to this world, they completely retained their original characters. Although obviously they will be loyal to Dean Riding, but in the case of absolute loyalty, their own attitude will affect the efficiency of doing things. Therefore, Dean Riding absolutely does not hope that because of Gnarly's incident, the Black Dragon and others will undergo completely different changes in handling things and performing tasks. Asterisk 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 asterisk. At this time, under the surface of the sea, Ganali, whose whole body was covered with jet black armament hockey, walked quickly around Sea King's body. .240 crisis. Whizzing. The sound of piercing through the air continued to sound, perhaps because the body of this Sea King's was too huge. Every time this Sea King's turns its body, it will set off heavy waves, constantly hitting Ganali's body. Under the current situation, Ganali could only desperately use his flexible mobility to minimize Haibo's damage to him. But if Ganali wants to completely avoid these injuries, it is impossible to do so. The body of the marine species determines that the huge sea waves it creates at will are not something ordinary people can easily resist. If 157 hadn't received special training and grown by leaps and bounds during this period of time because of Ganali's strength, I'm afraid he would have died under the unintentional waves of the Sea Kings at this time. At this moment, Ganali gritted his teeth tightly, his eyes were full of determination, and he was not willing to give up the pursuit at all. No, if this continues, I will die in these waves sooner or later. And if this continues, I won't be able to cause any damage to the Sea Kings in front of me. I have to change my fighting style. Soon, the thoughts in Ganali's brain began to run crazily, and then, bright brilliance began to bloom in his eyes. The long knife in his hand stabbed directly forward. Stamp. Then, the long knife in Ganali's hand lightly broke through the outermost layer of skin on the surface of the Sea King's body. Of course, Ganali's body was also firmly attached to the surface of the skin. Advertisement. This is not because Nali's strength is strong enough to directly break through the outermost layer of defense of the Sea Kings, but because the outermost layer of skin of the Sea Kings is originally intended to strengthen the suppleness between him and the sea water. Therefore, the outermost layer of skin is simply a so-called dead skin. And the corresponding skin under this dead skin is the real active skin belonging to Sea Kings. And at this BACF time, Ganali has a long way to go before he hurts the Sea Kings. At this time, Ganali firmly grasped the big knife in his hand. Relying on the big knife that slides freely from the dead skin, Ganali's body is constantly turning along with the Sea Kings, rolling crazily in the sea water. However, even so, Ganali has not been completely separated by the waves. But at this time, Ganali was already feeling a little comatose. After all, he was unable to kill Ganali for a long time, the speed of Sea King's churning became faster and faster, and the surrounding waves also became it is getting more and more turbulent. Roar. One after another roars sounded continuously, shouting that Wang Lei had already known the current situation of Ganali hanging on the surface of her body through his sensitive touch. But because this Sea Kings didn't have enough organs to get close to Ganali, it could only flip crazily in the sea, trying to completely leave Ganali in the sea. Thus, Sea Kings began to flip his body frantically. At this time, Ganali's situation has also become precarious. The dead skin of this Sea Kings is naturally very hard, but the quality of the big knife in Ganali's hand is not very good at all. If it wasn't covered by armament hockey, it might have been completely broken.